On April 22, 2024, at 9:30 in the morning, the quiet street of Check Hall Road in Yukon, Oklahoma trembled from the sound of police sirens. A few minutes earlier, the 911 dispatcher received a call from a 10-year-old boy who reported finding his entire family dead. The police officers who arrived at the scene discovered a true massacre. In the Candy family home lay the bodies of 5 people: 39-year-old Lindsay Candy, her sons, 18-year-old Dylan, 14-year-old Ethan, 12-year-old Lucas, and their 42-year-old father Jonathan Candy. Everyone except Jonathan died from gunshot wounds. Jonathan himself died by suicide, shooting himself in the head. For the neighbors and acquaintances, the Candy family was the embodiment of the American dream. Jonathan met Lindsay Terry when she was a young chorister in the church choir. He graduated from Bishop McGuinness Catholic School. She grew up in Prague, Oklahoma. Their marriage seemed like the perfect match. The jovial, witty Jonathan and the cheerful Lindsay created the family many dream of. Their Facebook page was filled with ordinary family photos: kids with ice cream-smeared faces, family picnics, sports competitions, home construction projects. Jonathan worked part-time at the Paycom Center, a large arena where concerts and sporting events were held. He often worked at the home games of the Oklahoma City Thunder team. Lindsay was actively involved in the kids' school life, organizing events and assisting teachers. Neighbors described them as a friendly family, always ready to help. According to one of the neighbors, 68-year-old Michael Burcham, Jonathan loved to socialize and help with various tasks around the neighborhood. In 2022, the couple even appeared in an episode of the program Discovering Oklahoma, talking about their favorite bakery in Yukon. In the video, they looked happy and carefree. Jonathan joked about breakfasts, and Lindsay shared her love for carrot cake. In all the years of living together, the police never once went to their address, neither because of family conflicts nor because of neighborly disputes. Nothing foreshadowed the looming tragedy. The Candy kids were a particular source of pride for their parents. The eldest son, Dylan, had just graduated from Mustang High School in May 2023. He had a special talent for music and played drums in the university orchestra at Oklahoma Baptist University, where he was a freshman. The university orchestra director, Brian Stackhouse, recalled how Dylan couldn't sit still with joy when he found out about his first orchestra solo. 14-year-old Ethan was in 9th grade at Mustang North Middle School and was a promising baseball player. His coach, T.J. Armstrong, called the boy "Sweet Candy" and noted his natural talent and extraordinary energy on the field. Ethan was the best friend of the coach's son, and they often spent time together after practice. 12-year-old Lucas, a student at Meadowbrook Intermediate, was an active child who loved sports and outdoor games. He was often seen at his older brother's practices, where he played with other children. The youngest, 10-year-old son, whose name is not disclosed for ethical reasons, was an ordinary cheerful boy. The family lived in a cozy house on a quiet street where everyone knew each other. Neighbors recall how the children often played in the yard, and Jonathan always found time to help with any household chores. He could mow the neighbor's lawn or help with repairs, never refusing to help. However, behind this perfect facade hid problems that later led to the tragedy. Financial documents found later by investigators indicated significant family debts. Unpaid medical bills, bank loans, and overdue credit cards created constant pressure. Working only part-time, Jonathan could hardly provide an adequate standard of living for a large family. However, none of those around noticed signs of serious problems. Jonathan continued to joke and create a cheerful atmosphere at work at the Paycom Center. Lindsay remained active in the kids' school life. The boys were doing well in school and engaged in their favorite activities. From the outside, everything looked quite normal. According to relatives, disagreements between Jonathan and Lindsay about finances became more frequent. Lindsay expressed concern about the family's future due to growing debts, while Jonathan felt he was losing control of the situation. In his diary, found later by investigators, he wrote about feelings of his own inadequacy to be the person his family needed. On the evening of April 21st, a few hours before the tragedy, Jonathan was working at the playoff game between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the New Orleans Pelicans. Colleagues recalled that he was in his usual mood, joking and talking to everyone. Nothing indicated that this would be his last working day. After returning home, according to investigators, a serious argument occurred between the couple. The details of this conversation will remain forever unknown, but it could have been the last straw. Forensic psychologist Dr. Joni Johnston, who analyzed the case, suggests that Jonathan may have been in a state of acute psychological crisis when a person loses the ability to think rationally. The exact timeline of events that night is difficult to establish. The only witness, the 10-year-old boy, was sleeping in his room with a fan turned on. He only remembers a short sound of the fire alarm at night, after which he fell asleep again. The noise of the fan drowned out all other sounds. Investigators found that 2 bodies were on the upper floor of the house, 2 on the lower floor. No signs of a struggle were found at the crime scene, which may indicate the suddenness of the attack or that the victims were taken by surprise. The weapon was found next to Jonathan's body. The decision of Jonathan to spare the youngest son remains particularly puzzling. Dr. Johnston notes that such cases are extremely rare. Usually in family murders, the perpetrator either kills all family members or touches no one. Perhaps at the last moment, parental feelings prevailed, or there was another unknown reason. According to investigators who arrived at the crime scene, the bodies were found in different parts of the house, which may indicate that Jonathan methodically moved from one victim to another. This is confirmed by the absence of signs of struggle. Probably, family members were caught by surprise during sleep. The investigation also revealed other alarming details. In Jonathan's personal diary, found in his desk at work, progressive depression could be traced. The entries of recent months were becoming increasingly gloomy. He wrote about feelings of his own inadequacy, about not meeting expectations as a father and husband. Financial problems and fear of the future were mentioned especially often. Forensic psychologist Dr. Joni Johnston, analyzing the diary, noted classic signs of hidden depression in men. Men often mask their emotional problems behind jokes and showy cheerfulness, she explains. In Jonathan's case, his reputation as the life of the party could have been a way to hide deep inner experiences. Jonathan's colleagues from the Paycom Center recalled that he always created a cheerful atmosphere at work. He constantly joked, tried to lift the mood of others, one of the employees said. I never saw him angry or irritated. Nothing indicated that he was capable of such a terrible act. However, the family's financial documents told a different story. Numerous unpaid bills, overdue credit card payments, and medical debts were found. Working only part-time at the arena, Jonathan could hardly provide sufficient income for a family of 6. Lindsay, who was engaged in housekeeping and childcare, did not have a regular job. Neighbors recalled that they had recently noticed certain changes in the behavior of the couple. They still seemed like a friendly couple, but something was off, neighbor Rhonda Armstrong said. Lindsay started smiling less, and Jonathan, although he continued to joke, looked somehow tense. The evening of April 21st was particularly important for the investigation. After working at the basketball game, Jonathan returned home and, according to relatives, a serious argument occurred between him and Lindsay. The details of this conversation are unknown, but it could have been the catalyst for the subsequent events. The tragedy unfolded in the quiet of the night. According to the investigation, the first shots rang out after midnight. The location of the bodies and ballistic examination allowed partial reconstruction of the sequence of events. Lindsay became the first victim. Her body was found in the bedroom on the first floor. Then Jonathan went upstairs, where he shot the older sons, Dylan and Ethan. Lucas probably woke up from the sounds of gunshots and tried to hide, but his father found him on the first floor. The youngest son was sleeping in his room with a fan turned on. This simple household appliance, creating white noise, possibly saved his life by drowning out the sounds of the tragedy. The only sound the boy remembered from that night was a short fire alarm signal, possibly triggered by gunpowder smoke. After killing the family members, Jonathan Candy wrote a short note, found later by investigators, next to his body. The contents of the note are not disclosed for ethical reasons, but, according to detectives, it contained an apology and an explanation of his actions related to feelings of hopelessness and inability to provide for the family. At 9:30 a.m., the 10-year-old boy woke up and, leaving his room, discovered a terrible scene. Showing composure unusual for his age, he called 911. The dispatcher later noted the child's extraordinary collectedness during the conversation, despite the shocking circumstances. The first police officers who arrived at the scene found the boy on the porch of the house. He was in a state of shock but was able to clearly answer questions. The officers immediately called for backup and medics, although it was obvious that no one would need help anymore, except for the child. Detectives, examining the crime scene, noted the neatness of the house. There were no signs of disorder or struggle anywhere, which is characteristic of sudden outbursts of violence. This led investigators to believe that the actions were premeditated. However, further investigation did not reveal evidence of long-term planning. Jonathan did not buy the weapon specifically for this, did not make detailed plans, did not leave extensive explanations of his intentions. Neighbors began to gather near the house, hearing the sirens of police cars. News of the tragedy quickly spread through the quiet street. Michael Burcham, a 68-year-old neighbor, could not believe what had happened. "I saw Jonathan literally yesterday. He was helping me with the lawnmower," he told the police. He was his usual self, joking, smiling. How could this happen? Brian Graham, another neighbor, recalled Jonathan as a reliable person, always ready to help. He could fix anything, always responded to requests for help. "It's just impossible to believe that such a person is capable of something like this," he shared with reporters who began to arrive at the scene. By noon, the area was filled with police cars, ambulances, and news service vans. The boy was taken by relatives who arrived immediately after learning about the tragedy. The police organized a press conference where they announced the first official details of the event. The community's reaction to the tragedy was immediate. Dylan's friends from the Oklahoma Baptist University Orchestra organized a memorial service where they displayed his dress uniform and favorite drum. Orchestra director Brian Stackhouse recalled how the young man could not contain his joy when he received his first solo. He just glowed with happiness. Dylan was a talented musician and a wonderful person. At Mustang North Middle School, where Ethan studied, Coach T.J. Armstrong gathered the team to report the death of their teammate. "Ethan was the heart of our team," the coach said, barely holding back tears. His energy and optimism inspired everyone around him. Ethan's friends, including the coach's son, decided to install a memorial bench on the baseball field in honor of their friend. Students at Meadowbrook Intermediate, where Lucas studied, created a wall of memory filled with photographs, drawings, and memories of the 12-year-old boy. His teachers remembered him as an active, cheerful student who was always ready to help others. Meanwhile, investigators continued to gather information about the family's last days. It turned out that Jonathan had recently tried to find an additional job, but without success. Financial documents showed growing debts for utilities and credit cards. His phone contained search queries about bankruptcy and debts. Friends of the family created a GoFundMe page to support the surviving boy. The fundraising goal was set at $100,000, and in the first days, more than $61,000 was raised. The boy's uncle, Brett Remarowski, expressed gratitude for the support, but noted, "All these expressions of attention make me wonder what will happen when the attention fades and only reality remains." Psychologists involved in working with the boy emphasized the importance of long-term support. "Trauma of this magnitude requires years of therapy and constant support," explained Dr. Joni Johnston. "It is important not only to help cope with the loss but also to understand what happened as he grows up." The investigation revealed that Jonathan suffered from a hidden form of depression, which is especially common among men. Instead of directly expressing sadness, they often masked their condition with showy cheerfulness and jokes. His constant jokes and desire to cheer others up could have been a way to hide his own problems. Cammie Cruz, Lindsay's childhood friend, shared memories of their school years. She told a story about how she and Lindsay once fell asleep in a treehouse, causing panic among parents, who even called the police. Lindsay always brought joy to any conversation, Cruz recalled. She was an extremely loving mother and wife. Jonathan's colleagues from the Paycom Center were shocked by the events. They described him as a reliable employee who created a positive atmosphere during Oklahoma City Thunder home games. No one noticed signs of stress or unusual behavior, even during his last shift at the playoff game. Jonathan's family released an official statement after the tragedy. Our entire family has been left shattered and bewildered, with countless questions that we will never get answers to. Jonathan was the one whose jokes and cheerful character made everyone smile. Aside from these events, his children and wife were his entire life. Investigators, analyzing Jonathan's psychological state, noted typical signs characteristic of family killers. Dr. Joni Johnston noted that such crimes are often associated with a loss of control over the life situation. These men often see their families as an extension of themselves, as their property. When they feel they are losing control of the situation, it can lead to catastrophic consequences. The family's financial situation turned out to be more complicated than it initially seemed. In addition to consumer debts, unpaid medical bills and overdue mortgage payments were found. Working only part-time at the arena, Jonathan could hardly provide sufficient income for a family of 6. The Yukon community organized several memorial services to honor the memory of the deceased. In the schools where the boys studied, special places of remembrance were created. Ethan's sports team decided to dedicate the season to him, and Dylan's music group performed a special concert in his honor. The city's psychological service organized support groups for friends of the family and classmates of the deceased children. Such tragedies affect the entire community, psychologist Joanna Smith explained. It is especially difficult for children who have lost friends and are trying to understand how this could happen. Investigators continue to work on understanding the motives of the tragedy. Analysis of Jonathan's phone revealed numerous search queries about depression and financial problems, but no signs of planning the crime. This confirmed the theory about the impulsive nature of his actions. Particular attention was drawn to the fact that the life of the youngest son was preserved. Forensic psychologists suggest several possible explanations, from a sudden manifestation of parental feelings to an inability to harm the youngest child. This is a rare case in the practice of family murders, noted Dr. Johnston. Usually such criminals either kill the entire family or touch no one. The investigation also revealed that Jonathan had recently tried to find additional work. Numerous submitted resumes and correspondence regarding possible employment were found on his computer. This indicated his attempts to improve the financial situation, but obviously unsuccessful. The police found that the weapon used in the murders legally belonged to Jonathan. He purchased it several years ago for self-defense, and none of the family or friends expressed concern about its presence in the house. The tragedy of the Candy family forced the Yukon community to reconsider its attitude towards mental health, especially among men. Local health organizations launched a campaign to raise awareness about hidden depression and the importance of seeking help in a timely manner. Men are often ashamed to talk about their emotional problems, explained Dr. Joanna Smith. They can wear a mask of cheerfulness for years, hiding serious psychological problems. The case of Jonathan Candy shows how dangerous such hiding can be. School psychologists conducted a series of meetings with students and parents, discussing the importance of open dialogue about emotional problems. We must learn to recognize the warning signs, school counselor Mark Thompson emphasized. Often the people who are suffering the most are the ones who hide it best. The Yukon Police Department made changes to the protocols for responding to family conflicts. Even if there are no obvious signs of violence, we need to be more attentive to hidden problems, noted Police Captain Robert Hayes. The story of the Candy family shows that the absence of previous calls does not mean the absence of problems. The local church community organized weekly support meetings for men where they could openly talk about their problems and fears. "We must break the stereotype that seeking help is a sign of weakness," emphasized Pastor Michael Green. In fact, it is a manifestation of wisdom and responsibility. Special attention was paid to supporting the 10-year-old boy who remained the only surviving member of the family. His uncle, Brett Remarowski, became the official guardian. "Our main task is to ensure that he has the most normal childhood possible, despite the tragic circumstances," he shared with the press. The community continued to raise funds to support the boy. In addition to GoFundMe, local entrepreneurs organized a charity golf tournament, and schools held several charity fairs. "This money will ensure his future education and long-term psychological support," explained the fundraiser organizer. School friends of the deceased brothers created an online memorial where they shared memories and photographs. "We want the memory of Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas to live on," wrote Ethan's classmate, Cooper Armstrong. "They were wonderful friends and will forever remain in our hearts." The Candy family case became an important lesson for the entire community. It showed how serious problems can hide behind the facade of a perfect family, and how important it is to notice warning signs in a timely manner and not be ashamed to seek help. The tragedy highlighted the issue of hidden depression, particularly among men. Local mental health organizations began offering more resources and support for those struggling with emotional problems. They emphasized the importance of breaking the stigma around seeking help and encouraged open conversations about mental health. Schools implemented new programs to educate students about emotional well-being and to provide a safe space for them to discuss their concerns. Teachers and staff received additional training on recognizing signs of distress and intervening when necessary. The Yukon Police Department also re-evaluated their approach to domestic situations. They implemented new protocols for assessing the risk of violence, even in the absence of prior incidents. Officers received training on identifying subtle signs of abuse and providing resources to families in need. The community rallied around the surviving boy, ensuring that he had a strong support system. His school provided counseling services and worked closely with his guardian to monitor his emotional well-being. Local organizations set up a trust fund to cover his future educational and medical expenses. As time passed, the makeshift memorials for the Candy family were replaced with permanent ones. A bench in Dylan's name was placed outside the music room at Oklahoma Baptist University. Ethan's baseball team retired his jersey number and hung it in the dugout. Lucas's classmates planted a tree in his memory on the school grounds. The house on Check Hall Road stood empty for months, a somber reminder of the tragedy that had occurred within its walls. Eventually, it was purchased by a young family who hoped to fill it with new memories and love. 1 year after the tragedy, the community gathered for a memorial service. They shared stories of the Candy family and reflected on the lessons learned. The surviving boy, now 11, spoke briefly, thanking everyone for their support and expressing his determination to honor his family's memory. In the years that followed, the boy grew into a resilient young man. He excelled in school and became an advocate for mental health awareness. He shared his story with others, hoping to inspire them to seek help and to break the cycle of silence. The Candy family tragedy served as a wake-up call for the entire community. It highlighted the importance of looking beyond the surface and offering support to those in need. It showed that even the most seemingly perfect families can struggle with hidden problems and that it is crucial to create a culture of openness and compassion. Though the pain of the loss would never fully heal, the community found strength in each other. They honored the memory of the Candy family by working to create a safer, more supportive environment for all. They hoped that by learning from this tragedy, they could prevent others from suffering the same fate. Years later, as the surviving boy graduated from college, he took a moment to reflect on his journey. He thought of his parents and siblings, and the love they had shared. He thought of the community that had rallied around him, providing strength when he needed it most. And he thought of the future, and the hope that he carried with him. As he stepped off the stage, diploma in hand, he knew that his family's legacy would live on through him. He was determined to make a difference in the world, to help others who were struggling, and to spread a message of hope and resilience. He knew that even in the darkest of times, there was always a reason to keep going, to keep fighting for a better tomorrow. The Candy family tragedy had left an indelible mark on the community of Yukon, Oklahoma. But it had also shown the incredible strength and compassion that could be found in the human spirit. It had shown that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there was always the potential for healing, for growth, and for hope. As the years passed, the story of the Candy family continued to be told, serving as a reminder of the importance of kindness, understanding, and support. It was a story of loss, but also one of resilience. It was a story that would never be forgotten, a story that would continue to inspire and to heal, long after the last page had been turned. In the world of social media, where anyone can create an ideal image of their life, April Holt's story unveils a dark reality often hidden behind bright filters and happy posts. A young mother of two, successful entrepreneur, and popular influencer with over 200,000 followers on TikTok, April seemed to embody the American dream. Her videos about positive thinking and manifesting success inspired thousands of people. But on July 28, 2023, this illusion of a perfect life shattered when April was found unconscious in the bathroom of her own home, with a plastic bag over her head. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident or perhaps an act of desperation soon evolved into a convoluted story of betrayal, hidden violence, and a mother's relentless fight for justice. This case not only exposes the dark side of influencer life but also calls into question our ability to distinguish between reality and fiction in the era of social media. April Holt's story is a narrative about how a terrible truth can hide behind a perfect facade, and about the power of one person to change the course of justice. April Lynn Holt was born on July 6, 1994 in Altamonte Springs, Florida, to parents Dershun Hicks and Jamie Woods. She spent her childhood in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where she grew into a vibrant and ambitious individual. April graduated from Riverdale High School in 2012, after which she began her journey towards professional success and recognition. As an adult, April chose a career as a lash technician, specializing in eyelash extensions. She demonstrated entrepreneurial skills by starting her own business and becoming self-employed. Her professional abilities and dedication to her craft quickly brought her success in this field. Alongside her career development, April actively built her presence on social media, especially on the TikTok platform. Her account quickly gained popularity, reaching over 200,000 followers. April created content focused on positive thinking, spiritual development, and coaching. She shared advice with her audience on personal growth, manifesting desired outcomes in life, and overcoming challenges. In her personal life, April became a mother to two children. Her older daughter, Serenity Dickerson, was born when April was still a teenager. Later, in her marriage to Donovan Holt, their son Denzel was born. April often showcased her family life on social media, creating an image of a happy family. April and Donovan's marriage was presented to the public as a love story that began with friendship and blossomed into a romantic relationship. They shared their life online, discussing the ups and downs of their married life. In their videos, they talked about the importance of communication, forgiveness, and personal growth within marriage. However, behind the scenes of their public image, the couple faced serious challenges. They went through a period of separation, financial difficulties, and struggled with depression. April, always optimistic, presented these difficulties as opportunities for growth and strengthening their relationship. In her videos, April openly talked about her challenging childhood, particularly her experience with homeschooling, which she described as a period of isolation from society. She shared how she overcame these difficulties in her teenage years, using her experiences to inspire others. Despite the outward appearance of success and happiness, April's close friends knew about problems in her marriage. 2 weeks before the tragic events that led to her death, April expressed a desire to divorce Donovan. This decision became a turning point in their relationship and possibly a catalyst for subsequent events. Despite the image of a perfect couple that April and Donovan created on social media, their marriage was far from ideal. Close friends and relatives knew about existing problems that the couple tried to hide from their online audience. The history of their relationship was complex. They started as friends, then became best friends, and eventually their friendship turned into a romantic relationship. They often presented this journey from friendship to love as the foundation of their marriage's strength. In their videos, they emphasized the importance of maintaining friendly relations even in the most difficult moments of married life. However, behind the scenes of this public image, the couple faced serious challenges. They went through a period of separation that lasted 3 years. They later described this time apart as an opportunity for personal growth and re-evaluation of their relationship. After reuniting, they tried to present their experience as an example of how to overcome difficulties and strengthen a marriage. Financial problems were also a source of tension in their relationship. Despite April's success as a lash technician and influencer, the couple faced periods of financial instability. They tried to present these difficulties to their audience as trials that strengthened their bond. Additionally, both struggled with depression. April openly talked about her psychological problems in her videos, trying to use her experience to support others. She shared about periods when she felt depressed and overwhelmed, but always emphasized the importance of positive thinking and manifesting a better life. 2 weeks before the tragic events that led to her death, April made the decision to divorce. This wasn't the first attempt to end the marriage. Previously, the couple had already gone through a divorce process that led to their 3-year separation. However, this time April was more determined. The decision to divorce became a turning point in their relationship. Although they continued to publicly demonstrate the image of a friendly couple parting amicably, the tension between them was growing. April informed her mother, Jamie Dickerson, that this time she was firmly decided to leave Donovan for good. Donovan also seemed to realize the seriousness of the situation. A week before April's death, he pawned his wedding ring, which could be seen as a symbolic gesture of accepting the end of their marriage. Despite attempts to maintain a positive image in the eyes of their audience, internal conflicts in their marriage were becoming increasingly evident. The tension between them reached a critical point on July 28, 2023, a day that would forever change their family's life. July 28, 2023 began as a usual day for April Holt. According to her mother, Jamie Dickerson, April woke up early, had her morning coffee, and, as always, wrote in her journal. This was her usual morning routine that helped her set the tone for the day. April hugged and kissed her 7-year-old son Denzel, showing her love and affection for the child. That morning, April had a brief phone conversation with her mother. They discussed weekend plans, including the possibility of watching the Barbie movie together. However, April said she couldn't go to the cinema that day because Donovan had to work. They agreed to meet at church the next day. This conversation became the last one between mother and daughter. After this conversation, an argument broke out between April and Donovan. The details of their dispute remain unclear, but according to their son Denzel's testimony, he heard his parents arguing in the bathroom. The boy listened at the door, trying to understand what was going on, but couldn't make out the words. He saw both parents' feet under the bathroom door. After the argument, Donovan came out of the bathroom and took care of Denzel. He dressed his son and prepared food for him. About 2 hours after the initial argument, Donovan asked Denzel to check on his mother. When Denzel entered the bathroom, he encountered a horrific scene. He saw his mother lying on the bathroom floor with a plastic bag over her head. April was unconscious and not breathing. The frightened boy immediately reported this to his father. Donovan called for an ambulance. When paramedics arrived at the scene, they found April in critical condition. She was urgently taken to Southern Hills Hospital, where doctors fought for her life. Jamie Dickerson received the shocking call from Donovan just a few hours after her morning conversation with her daughter. He informed her that April had been urgently hospitalized and that her condition was critical. Jamie immediately went to the hospital, where she learned that her daughter had no brain activity and blood circulation to the brain had stopped. It's important to note that for the first 6 hours after the incident, neither Jamie or other family members were informed about the plastic bag found on April's head. This critical detail was revealed much later, raising suspicions in Jamie about the circumstances of the incident. Over the next few days, while April was in the hospital, Donovan returned to their apartment several times. The purpose of these visits remained unclear to Jamie, which later became another source of her suspicions. For 3 days, April fought for her life in the hospital. Doctors and family hoped for a miracle, but April's condition did not improve. On July 31, 2023, at the age of 29, April Holt was officially declared dead. April's death came as a shock to her family, friends, and numerous social media followers. A young mother of 2 children, a successful entrepreneur, and a popular influencer passed away under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind many questions and unresolved issues. April Holt's death raised many questions from the very beginning. The Nashville police started an investigation, but their initial conclusions were ambiguous and raised doubts in April's family, especially her mother, Jamie Dickerson. Initially, investigators leaned towards the version of suicide. The presence of a plastic bag on April's head and the absence of obvious signs of struggle or violence led them to this conclusion. However, Jamie Dickerson rejected this theory from the start. She was convinced that her daughter would never voluntarily leave her children. Jamie began her own investigation, carefully examining all available facts and testimonies. She drew attention to several key points that, in her opinion, contradicted the suicide version. 1. Timing. April had filed for divorce just 2 weeks before her death. Jamie believed this indicated her daughter's desire to start a new life, not end it. 2. Donovan's behavior. Jamie noted that Donovan's behavior at the hospital seemed strange to her. He didn't show the reaction one would expect from a husband whose wife is between life and death. 3. Return to the apartment. The fact that Donovan returned to their apartment several times after the incident raised suspicions in Jamie. 4. Denzel's testimony. The 7-year-old son's account of hearing his parents argue before the incident became an important element in Jamie's investigation. Jamie insisted on a thorough autopsy of April's body. When the autopsy results were released in November 2023, they didn't meet Jamie's expectations. The medical examiner concluded that the cause of death was asphyxiation but classified the death as suicide. This determination didn't satisfy Jamie. She drew attention to details that, in her opinion, contradicted the suicide version. There were noticeable bruises on April's body, and the autopsy report mentioned marks on her neck, thighs, and ankles. Particularly troubling was a deep cut on the inner side of April's thigh. Jamie continued to insist on a more thorough investigation. She reached out to local news channels, trying to draw public attention to her daughter's case. However, after the police officially closed the case, media interest quickly faded. Despite this, Jamie didn't give up. She filed an official complaint with the Nashville Civilian Oversight Board, demanding a full review of the case. This action forced the Nashville police to start a reinvestigation. For months after the start of the reinvestigation, the police presented a 47-page report. Although this report didn't change the official classification of April's death, it provided Jamie with a lot of new information to analyze. Jamie carefully studied every detail of the report, looking for any inconsistencies or omissions. She spent hours comparing different testimonies and analyzing the timeline of events on that fatal day. Parallel to her own investigation, Jamie fought for custody of her grandchildren. She believed that the children, especially Denzel, who witnessed the events of that day, needed a stable and safe environment. Jamie also used social media to draw attention to April's case. She regularly posted updates about the progress of the investigation and shared memories of her daughter. These posts quickly gained popularity, creating an online support community demanding justice for April. However, this social media activity had negative consequences. In April 2024, Jamie was forced to stop her posts about the case due to a court injunction. This was a serious blow to her efforts, but she didn't give up. Despite the ban, Jamie continued to work on the case behind the scenes. She consulted with lawyers, met with detectives, and continued to gather evidence. Her persistence and dedication to finding the truth became the driving force of the investigation. Gradually, thanks to Jamie's tireless efforts, April's case began to take a new turn. New evidence and testimonies began to emerge, casting doubt on the initial conclusions of the investigation. The turning point in the case came in September 2024, more than a year after April's death. Jamie Dickerson, despite the court injunction, continued her search for the truth. Her persistence finally brought results. A key element of the breakthrough was the fingerprints found on the plastic bag and tape that were wrapped around April's head. According to the report Jamie received, only one set of fingerprints was found on these items, and they didn't belong to April. These fingerprints matched Donovan Holt. Armed with this information, Jamie decided to confront her former son-in-law directly. In September, she met with Donovan and presented him with the evidence she had gathered. During this tense conversation, something unexpected happened. Donovan confessed. According to Jamie, Donovan told her that in a fit of anger during an argument, he strangled April. Then, trying to cover up his crime, he dragged her body into the shower, put a bag over her head, and secured it with tape. After that, he went to prepare lunch for their son before asking Denzel to check on his mother and call an ambulance. Jamie recorded this confession and immediately handed it over to the police. This new information forced law enforcement to review the case. A reanalysis of the autopsy results was conducted, and the conclusion was changed. April's death was now classified as murder. On September 20, 2024, the Nashville police announced the arrest of Donovan Holt. He was detained in San Antonio, Texas, where he had moved after April's death. According to the police report, Donovan confessed to detectives about murdering his wife. A grand jury indicted Donovan on charges of reckless homicide, tampering with evidence, and giving false testimony. He was extradited from Texas to Tennessee, where he was taken into custody with a bail set at $75,000. Donovan's arrest was the culmination of more than a year of Jamie's fight for justice. Her persistence, despite numerous obstacles, eventually led to a breakthrough in the case. News of Donovan's arrest spread quickly, causing a wave of reactions in the community. Many expressed support for April's family, especially her children and mother. Others discussed how the justice system could have initially missed such important evidence. For Jamie, Donovan's arrest was confirmation of her suspicions and justification for her tireless efforts. However, she understood that this was only the beginning of a long legal process. Jamie was ready to continue the fight to ensure maximum punishment for Donovan. Meanwhile, April's children, Serenity and Denzel, remained under Jamie's care. She made every effort to provide them with a stable and loving environment, despite the trauma they had experienced. Jamie was also working on creating the Grief With Me Center, a support center for those who have lost loved ones to violent crimes. April Holt's case drew attention to issues of domestic violence and the importance of thorough investigation of suspicious deaths. It also highlighted the role of social media in covering and solving crimes, as well as the potential dangers of creating an idealized online image. Donovan Holt's arrest was just the beginning of a long legal process. On October 23, 2024, a preliminary hearing took place, where Donovan was officially charged. He appeared in court facing charges of reckless homicide, tampering with evidence, and giving false testimony. The trial attracted significant public and media attention. April Holt's story, her popularity on social media, and the shocking circumstances of her death made this case a subject of wide discussion. The court became a platform where details of their married life, previously hidden behind an idealized image on social media, were revealed. Prosecutors presented evidence supporting the version of events described in Donovan's confession. They emphasized the fingerprints on the plastic bag and tape, as well as inconsistencies in Donovan's initial testimony. An important witness was Denzel, April, and Donovan's son, whose testimony about his parents' argument on that fatal day became crucial to the case. Donovan's defense tried to present April's death as a tragic accident that occurred as a result of an argument that got out of control. They emphasized the absence of previous incidents of physical violence in their relationship and Donovan's emotional state after the incident. Jamie Dickerson was an active participant in the trial, testifying as a witness in supporting the prosecution. Her testimony about the last conversation with her daughter, suspicions about Donovan's behavior after the incident, and her tireless efforts to find the truth became an important part of the prosecution's case. The trial lasted several weeks, during which numerous witnesses were heard and detailed evidence was presented. Society closely followed each day of the court sessions, and social media was filled with discussions and speculation. Eventually, the jury reached a verdict. Donovan Holt was found guilty on all charges against him. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison for reckless homicide with additional terms for tampering with evidence and giving false testimony. The verdict was received with relief by April's family and supporters. Jamie Dickerson, speaking to the press after the sentencing, expressed mixed feelings, relief that justice had finally prevailed, but also deep grief for her lost daughter. April Holt's case had a significant impact on society. It drew attention to the issue of domestic violence, especially in the context of couples who seem perfect on social media. Many organizations fighting domestic violence used this story to raise awareness and encourage victims to seek help. Additionally, the case sparked discussions about the need for more thorough investigations of suspicious deaths, especially when it comes to young women. Many experts criticized the initial investigation, pointing out omissions that could have been detected earlier. For April's children, Serenity and Denzel, the verdict meant a certain measure of closure, but also the beginning of a new stage in their lives. Jamie Dickerson continued to care for them, trying to provide the stability and support they needed. The Grief With Me Center, founded by Jamie, became an important resource for families who have experienced similar tragedies. The center offered counseling, support groups, and various programs aimed at helping people cope with grief and trauma. April Holt's death and the trial of Donovan deeply affected the lives of many people, especially her family. April's children, Serenity and Denzel, faced the difficult task of adapting to life without both parents. Jamie Dickerson, their grandmother, took on the role of primary caregiver, striving to provide them with a stable and loving environment. Jamie continued her mission of supporting others, developing the Grief With Me Center. This center became an important resource for families who have experienced similar tragedies, offering counseling, support groups, and therapeutic activities. April's story had a significant impact on public consciousness, becoming a catalyst for discussing important topics such as domestic violence and the dangers of idealizing life on social media. Organizations fighting domestic violence used her story to raise awareness and encourage victims to seek help. The case also influenced legislation. In the state of Tennessee, debates were initiated to strengthen domestic violence laws and improve procedures for investigating suspicious deaths. And April's Law was proposed, which would require more thorough investigation of cases involving the deaths of young women. On social media, April's memory continued to live on. Her former followers regularly shared memories of her and discussed lessons that could be learned from her story. The hashtag Justice for April became a symbol of the fight against domestic violence. Jamie Dickerson wrote a book titled Grieving Through Grace about her experience, which became a bestseller and helped many people going through similar tragedies. The professional community of lash technicians created the April Holt Memorial Scholarship Fund to support young women in this field. The April Holt case generated numerous discussions about the nature of truth, justice, and the role of various institutions in achieving them. It highlighted both the strengths and weaknesses of the justice system, media, and social networks. A key lesson was the importance of persistence in seeking truth. Jamie Dickerson's tireless efforts underscored the role that individuals can play in achieving justice, even when facing resistance from official institutions. The case prompted a critical look at the work of law enforcement agencies, emphasizing the need for more thorough and unbiased investigations. The role of social media proved ambiguous, sparking discussions about the authenticity of online representations and the potential dangers of excessive reliance on social networks. April's story became a catalyst for discussing broader social issues such as domestic violence, mental health, and the importance of supporting loved ones. It highlighted the need for greater awareness and early intervention. For the legal system, this case became an important lesson, leading to a reassessment of investigation procedures. It also raised ethical questions about influencers' responsibility to their audience and the need for critical thinking regarding information on social media. Ultimately, April's story served as a reminder of the fragility of life, the complexity of human relationships, and the importance of protecting vulnerable members of society. Her legacy continues to live on through the changes she inspired and the lives she may have saved even after her death. The story of Samia Shahid begins in the small village of Pandori, Pakistan. This is the place where the Shahid family originated, who later decided to seek a better life in Great Britain. Pandori, a typical Pakistani village, was a center of traditional values and established way of life. Here, everyone knew their neighbor, and family ties were valued above all else. Chaudhry Muhammad and Imtiaz, Samia's parents, grew up in this environment where Islamic traditions and cultural customs shaped the worldview of every resident. They belonged to the Sunni branch of Islam, the largest sect of this religion. Sunni Islam, with its emphasis on adhering to traditions and respecting family values, deeply influenced their lives and future decisions. In Pandori, marriages were often arranged by parents, and marriages between cousins were a common practice. This tradition aimed to preserve family property and strengthen family ties. Chaudhry Muhammad and Imtiaz themselves were cousins, and their marriage was the result of such an arrangement. Seeking a better life for their family, Chaudhry Muhammad and Imtiaz decided to emigrate to Great Britain. They settled in Bradford, a city in West Yorkshire, which already had a significant South Asian community. On November 15, 1987, Samia Shahid was born in this city. Bradford, the sixth largest city in England, became home to many immigrants from South Asia. Here, the Shahid family found their place among a community that tried to preserve its traditions and culture in a new environment. Samia grew up with her sister Mida surrounded by a large family that quickly gained influence in the local community. Samia's parents, like many other immigrants, worked hard to ensure a better future for their children. They opened their own limousine and car rental business, which became successful. Other family members also developed their businesses. Samia's uncle owned a fish and chips shop, another owned a flower shop. This entrepreneurial spirit of the Shahid family helped them establish themselves in the new society and ensure financial stability. Samia's childhood and youth were influenced by two different cultures, British and Pakistani. As a second-generation immigrant, she constantly balanced between the values and traditions of her Pakistani heritage and the realities of life in a Western country. On one hand, Samia attended a British school, interacted with local peers, and was immersed in Western pop culture. She loved fast cars, was fascinated by makeup and fashion. Her friends described her as a cheerful, sociable, and active girl who was always the center of attention. On the other hand, at home, Samia lived in a world of Pakistani traditions. The Shahid family, while providing girls with the opportunity to receive a Western education, remained devoted to their Muslim faith and cultural customs. They were Sunni Muslims, and religion played an important role in their daily lives. This duality often created an internal conflict for Samia. She loved her family and respected their traditions, but she also longed for the freedom and independence she saw in her British peers. For example, although Samia loved driving, she wasn't allowed to do so due to cultural restrictions. However, according to her friends, she sometimes secretly rented a car and drove, enjoying the speed and freedom. Samia worked part-time at the Bradford post office but received significant financial support from her father. Chaudhry Muhammad, like a typical Pakistani father, spared no expense for his beloved daughter's wishes. This generosity, however, was often accompanied by high expectations regarding Samia's behavior and her dedication to family values. At the same time, Samia's sister, Mida, had a somewhat different view on life. Although the details of their relationship are not fully disclosed in the sources, it seems that Mida was more inclined towards a traditional lifestyle. These differences between the sisters could create additional tension in the family. In 2012, when Samia turned 25, her parents decided it was time for her to get married. This decision reflected traditional Pakistani values, where marriage is seen not only as a union of two people but also as a unification of two families. Although Sunni Islam, which the family adhered to, did not require arranged marriages, such practice was still encouraged in their culture. Samia's parents approached the choice of a husband for their daughter with all seriousness. They were looking for a candidate who would meet their idea of an ideal son-in-law, from a good family, with an appropriate social status, and, most importantly, someone who would share their cultural and religious values. After careful consideration, they settled on Chaudhry Muhammad Shakil. Shakil was Samia's cousin and came from their native village of Pandori in Pakistan. The choice of a relative as a future husband was not accidental. Among British Pakistanis, marriages between cousins were a common practice, often with the aim of preserving land ownership within the family and strengthening family ties. However, Shakil had an ambiguous reputation. He had recently been released from prison, where he had served a sentence for shooting another man over a land dispute. This fact caused concern for Samia, but her parents seemed to not give it much importance, perhaps believing that marriage would help Shakil get on the right path. When Samia was informed about the plans for her marriage, she found herself faced with a difficult choice. On one hand, she had grown up in Britain and dreamed of romantic love and marriage by her own choice. On the other hand, she deeply respected her parents and didn't want to disappoint them. Moreover, the concept of family honor, deeply rooted in their culture, put significant pressure on her. Samia shared her doubts with close friends. She told them that she saw Shakil more as a brother than a potential husband. She also expressed concern about his past and character. However, publicly, Samia tried to show enthusiasm about the upcoming wedding, not wanting to upset her family. Preparation for the wedding turned into a grand event. Samia's parents spared no expense to make the ceremony as lavish as possible. They took Samia to the best Pakistani shops in Bradford, buying luxurious outfits, precious jewelry, and exquisite accessories. Chaudhry Muhammad paid for all these purchases, demonstrating his love for his daughter and desire to provide her with the best wedding. Samia participated in these preparations, trying to find joy in choosing wedding attire and jewelry. She understood that these material things were her parents' way of expressing their love and care. However, deep inside, she felt that money couldn't buy true happiness. During this period, Samia faced an internal conflict. She was torn between the desire to meet her family's expectations and her own doubts about the future marriage. Her friends recalled that she often seemed upset and confused, although she tried to hide it from her family. In February 2012, Samia traveled to Pakistan to prepare for the wedding. Before leaving, she wrote a message to a friend, confessing that she was making the biggest mistake of her life. This message vividly illustrated her internal struggles and doubts about the upcoming marriage. Samia and Shakil's wedding was a lavish celebration that lasted 4 days and gathered over 1,000 guests. It was a typical Pakistani wedding ceremony, full of colorful rituals and traditions. Guests from Bradford came to Pakistan to share the joy of this event with the Shahid family. The wedding ceremony included the traditional nikah, an Islamic marriage contract that was conducted in the presence of witnesses and a religious figure. This rite, according to Islamic traditions, was considered the official conclusion of marriage. However, it's important to note that this religious marriage was not necessarily recognized as legal in Great Britain without additional civil registration. As a wedding gift, Samia's father, Chaudhry Muhammad, gave the newlyweds the house next to the family home in Pandori. This gesture demonstrated not only the father's generosity but also the traditional expectation that the young couple would stay living near the parental home, maintaining close family ties. After the wedding, Samia stayed to live with Shakil in Pakistan. For her, this was a significant change, from living in a modern British city to residing in a traditional Pakistani village. Samia faced the need to adapt to a completely different way of life, with more limited opportunities for personal freedom and self-realization. For 4 months, Samia tried to adjust to her new life as a wife in Pakistan. This period was full of challenges for her. She had to get used to a new daily routine, fulfill the duties of a wife according to local traditions, and all this in an environment that was significantly different from what she was used to in Bradford. In June 2012, after 4 months of living in Pakistan, Samia returned to Bradford. Her husband, Shakil, remained in Pakistan, waiting for immigration documents to be processed. This moment became critical in their relationship, as distance and cultural differences began to create additional tension. Upon returning to Bradford, Samia had to apply for a visa for Shakil so that he could become a British citizen. This process was an important step for uniting the couple in Great Britain. However, according to Samia's friends, she was not in a hurry with this process, which could indicate her doubts about the future of their marriage. Samia's friends noticed significant changes in her behavior after her return. She became more withdrawn, nervous, and agitated, especially when the conversation turned to Shakil or their marriage. These changes indicated an internal conflict and discomfort that Samia was feeling. Despite living in different countries, Shakil insisted on daily video calls via Skype and constant communication throughout the day. This demand created additional pressure on Samia, limiting her personal freedom and ability to lead her usual life in Britain. In August 2012, the situation escalated. Samia left a voice message to a friend expressing a desire to die, talking about hating her life and not wanting to be Shakil's wife anymore. This message vividly demonstrated the depth of her emotional stress and dissatisfaction with the marriage. It's important to note that there are different views on Samia's situation during this period. Her sister Madiha later claimed that Samia boasted about her lavish wedding and talked about happiness in marriage. This discrepancy in testimonies underscores the complexity of the situation and the possible difference between how Samia presented her life publicly and what she actually felt. A documentary about this case shows a photograph of Samia with a black eye, dated August 2012. Although the exact origin of this bruise is not established, its presence raises questions about possible violence in the relationship. However, it's important to note that this photograph could have been taken at a different time, and the date of its sending to a friend does not necessarily correspond to the date of the incident itself. In December 2012, after approximately 6 months of living in Bradford, Samia returned to Pakistan again to live with Shakil. This decision could have been the result of family pressure or an attempt to save the marriage. However, according to her friends, the situation did not improve and Samia was still not happy. In June 2013, Samia returned to Bradford again after 6 months of living with Shakil in Pakistan. This time, friends noticed significant changes in her behavior. She seemed happier, more communicative, and lively. The reason for these changes soon became clear: Samia had met someone new. This person was Syed Mukhtar Kazim, whom friends called Ali. He, like Samia, had Pakistani origins but possessed British citizenship and worked in Dubai. Their acquaintance began on the internet, where they initially established a friendly relationship. In October 2013, Samia and Ali met in person for the first time in London. This meeting became a turning point in Samia's life. According to her, there was an immediate strong mutual attraction between them. Ali embodied everything Samia desired in a man. He was loving, caring, kind, and understanding. Samia opened up to Ali, telling him about her difficult situation with Shakil. She shared her feelings about the marriage, which she considered imposed, and how she felt controlled and unhappy. Ali, for his part, couldn't understand how a father could turn his daughter into an object for exchange or sale. Their relationship developed quickly, but both were aware of the risks associated with their connection. In a culture where divorce and extramarital relationships were strongly condemned, their love could have serious consequences. However, they felt that their feelings were stronger than the fear of possible threats and worth fighting for. For Samia, her relationship with Ali became a breath of fresh air. She felt that she had finally met someone who understood her desire for freedom and personal happiness. Ali supported her desire to live her own life and didn't try to control her as Shakil did. However, their relationship was not cloudless. They knew that their connection could cause serious conflict with Samia's family and threaten their safety. The story of Banaz Mahmud, a young British woman of Kurdish origin who was killed by her own family for a relationship with a man her parents didn't approve of, was fresh in the memory of many in their community. Samia and Ali were aware that their situation could have similar risks. Despite these fears, Samia and Ali continued to develop their relationship. They dreamed of a shared future where they could freely love each other, have children, and grow old together. These dreams gave Samia the strength to resist family pressure and traditions. In May 2014, Samia made the brave decision to divorce Shakil. This was not an easy decision, considering the cultural context and possible consequences for her family. However, Samia felt that she couldn't continue living in a marriage that made her unhappy. The divorce process proved to be complicated due to the peculiarities of their marriage. Since Samia and Shakil's marriage was not registered under British law, she couldn't divorce through a British court. Instead, she turned to the Islamic Sharia Council of Great Britain. Before approaching the council, Samia took another important step. She converted from Sunni to Shia Islam, the branch to which Ali belonged. This step had not only religious significance but also symbolized her desire for a new life and readiness to abandon the past. Samia visited a mosque where she met with a religious leader named Mr. Kazmi. Under oath, she stated that her first marriage was forced and concluded without her free will, under family pressure. This testimony was critical for the divorce process, as under Islamic law, a marriage concluded under coercion can be declared invalid. After receiving Samia's testimony, Mr. Kazmi contacted Shakil, asking for his version of events. However, Shakil refused to discuss their marriage, which led to Mr. Kazmi declaring Samia and Shakil's marriage invalid. This divorce process took place in secret from Samia's family. Several close friends supported her, being present when she signed the divorce papers. The fact that Samia was able to conduct this procedure while living in her parents' house in Bradford testifies to her determination and resourcefulness in achieving her goal. Soon after the divorce, Samia and Ali began planning their own wedding. Their decision to marry was a bold step, considering the potential consequences and reaction from Samia's family. They understood that their marriage had to remain a secret to protect both of them from possible negative reactions. In September 2014, Samia and Ali secretly married in Leeds. The ceremony was modest, attended only by a few close friends who helped the bride prepare for the ceremony. The Nikah, Islamic marriage ceremony, was conducted by the same Mr. Kazmi who had previously granted Samia a divorce. The wedding day was filled with joy and emotions. According to friends, Samia was radiant with happiness and said she felt like a real princess. This sharply contrasted with her first wedding, where she felt anxiety and doubts. Ali recalled that on this day he was not only the groom but also played the roles of driver and photographer, which emphasized the intimate and personal nature of their ceremony. It's important to note that Samia and Ali didn't limit themselves to just a religious ceremony. They also registered their marriage in an English registry office, thus ensuring legal recognition of their union in Great Britain. This step demonstrated their desire to build a shared future on a solid legal foundation. However, the joy of the secret wedding was short-lived. In October 2014, shortly after the marriage, Samia became a victim of an attack. As she was walking down the street with her cousin, she was attacked by several men in an alley. Strangely, only Samia was hurt. She was beaten with metal rods on her legs. This incident was clearly not accidental. The nature of the attack and the fact that only Samia was injured indicated that the attack was planned and specifically directed against her. This raised suspicions that someone, possibly connected to her family, had learned about her new marriage and decided to punish her. Samia and her cousin immediately reported the attack to the police. A medical examination confirmed the seriousness of the injuries. Samia's legs were covered with red and purple bruises. This incident became an alarming signal for Samia and Ali, demonstrating the reality of the threat they faced. At this time, Ali had to return to Dubai for work, leaving Samia in Bradford waiting for a visa that would allow her to join him later. This separation was painful for both, especially considering the recent attack and growing tension in Samia's family. It seems that the Shahid family learned about their daughter's attack from a phone call when she called her parents from the police station. However, instead of support, Samia faced a stream of insults. The police heard the entire conversation, while Samia's mother, Imtiaz, didn't know that others were listening. Samia deliberately did this to show the police the toxic environment in which she had been living recently. This conversation became vivid evidence of the difficult situation in which Samia found herself. She felt like a prisoner in the house where she once was happy, enduring unpleasant words from people she loved more than life. Living in a family with such strong beliefs and established values was difficult. Sometimes Samia felt like she was suffocating from constant control and couldn't escape from the web of imposed principles. For Samia, who grew up in Western culture and was used to relying on her parents for everything, a different life seemed unreal, a life where she could make her own decisions and make her own choices. The secret marriage to Ali gave her the strength to hold on and not give up. Samia's parents learned about her divorce from Shakil only in May 2015 and reacted extremely negatively to her actions. Until this time, they probably only suspected something but didn't voice their doubts aloud. They claimed that the divorce was invalid since the Islamic Sharia Council had no legal authority in either Great Britain or Pakistan. Therefore, in their opinion, Samia was still legally married to Shakil. Samia's mother expressed the most displeasure. Imtiaz repeatedly insulted her daughter, telling her to come to her senses and not disgrace the family. This reaction deeply hurt Samia, who had hoped for understanding and support from her parents. When Ali returned to Dubai, he hoped that the situation would calm down. However, the newlyweds understood that they would never be safe if they stayed in Bradford. Family disapproval could lead to tragedy. There are many stories about honor-related crimes, and Samia and Ali didn't want to become the next victims. Fortunately, that same month, Samia received a visa to move to Dubai. Several friends helped her secretly buy a ticket and prepare for departure. As soon as the documents were ready, Samia boarded a plane and flew to Ali the next day. This was not an easy decision, considering how much she loved her family. But for the first time, she went against the will of her loved ones for her own happiness, hoping that this sacrifice would justify itself. As soon as Samia flew to Dubai, her parents reported her missing to the police. The family simply didn't want to accept the fact that she had made her own choice and ignored their opinion. When they learned about their daughter's secret marriage, they declared the second marriage fictitious. They even went to the Shia mosque cleric, Mr. Kazmi, demanding explanations. They refused to listen to any reasonable arguments and equated their daughter's relationship with Ali to adultery, believing that under Muslim law she was still married to Shakil. The Shahid family even threatened the cleric for facilitating Samia's sin. Mr. Kazmi reported the threats to the police, and the authorities provided him with some safety advice. Meanwhile, Samia was extremely happy in Dubai. She enjoyed a carefree, free life full of love. She drove a car, cooked, and was deeply in love with her husband, Ali. Samia openly shared her happiness on social media. She and Ali couldn't wait to become parents. Samia very much wanted a child and dreamed of becoming a mother as soon as possible. At the same time, Samia couldn't completely let go of ties with her family and wanted to exist in both worlds, in Bradford and Dubai. She always dreamed of raising her future children in Great Britain so that they would become British. Samia had spent almost all of her conscious life in England, surrounded by a large family, and couldn't imagine that this tension between her and her loved ones would last forever. Samia talked to her parents almost every day, trying to convince them that she wasn't guilty and just wanted to be happy. Every minute of her marriage to Shakil had been a burden for her. She wanted her parents to love Ali as much as she did and accept her choice. More than anything, Samia dreamed of seeing her father together with Ali, but unfortunately, her dream was not destined to come true. Instead, Chaudhry Muhammad called the fake son-in-law and asked him to leave his daughter alone. Naturally, Ali refused, stating that Samia was now his lawful wife and he wouldn't give her up. In Muhammad's eyes, the new husband didn't become part of the family, partly because he wasn't a Sunni Muslim. Moreover, their marriage was conducted secretly, without parental approval. Reputation and family honor are of great importance in some cultures. Ali and Samia, in the opinion of her parents and other relatives, showed disrespect to the Shahid family, and now everyone would point fingers at them. In their eyes, a woman's desire to live her own life was an unthinkable luxury and a betrayal of the family. In June 2016, Samia learned that Shakil's mother, her aunt, had died. Samia was very upset. She loved her aunt and wanted to go to Pakistan for the funeral. But she knew that the trip would be risky and dangerous, especially considering that many, including Shakil's relatives, thought that she had disgraced them and brought shame to the family. Ali advised against going, and she agreed that it was better to stay in Dubai. Samia's father, Muhammad, was also struggling with health problems. He suffered from diabetes. One day, Samia received a call from her mother and sister Mida. They said that during their stay in Pakistan, their father's health had significantly deteriorated, and he might not have much time left. Samia would never forgive herself if her father died and she didn't say goodbye to him. So after long deliberation, she made the final decision to go to Pakistan. Ali didn't agree with her choice. He was very upset but felt helpless. After all, it was her father. How could he stop her? If something happened to Chaudhry Muhammad and she wasn't there, Samia would never forgive herself. Besides, Mida had already booked her a plane ticket. Thus, feeling enormous fear for his wife, Ali still drove her to the airport. He said that she could still change her mind. Excited about the upcoming meeting with loved ones she hadn't seen for a long time, Samia assured her husband that she would be all right. They said goodbye. Samia boarded the plane and on July 14, 2016, flew to Pakistan. Before the flight, she sent a message to a friend saying, "Pray that I come back alive." On the first night in Pakistan, Samia stayed at a friend's house. She left her documents and return ticket there for safety. Throughout her stay, she maintained constant contact with Ali, assuring him of her safety. She spent all her time in Pakistan with her family. On July 18, she visited her aunt's grave with her father. On July 19, Ali told her about a bad dream he had, to which she responded by asking him to pray for her safe return to Dubai. She was supposed to fly home in 2 days, but on July 20th, Samia stopped responding to messages. Ali's messages remained unread, and this silence greatly worried him. That evening, a distressed man called the Pandori police station, reporting the death of his daughter. When the police arrived at the specified address, they found a woman's body at the foot of the stairs. She was dead, and it was Samia. Her shoes were nearby, her handbag was at her feet, and her face was covered with a black scarf. Her eyes were closed, and foam was coming from her mouth. The man who called introduced himself as Samia's father, Muhammad. He told the officers that his daughter lived in this house with her husband Shakil, and pointed to the stairs from which she allegedly fell and died. When the police asked where Shakil was, the father shrugged and said he didn't know. No one had seen him since Samia's death. A few hours later, Samia's mother and sister arrived in Pakistan, having learned of her death. An autopsy was immediately conducted, after which the young woman's body was handed over to relatives. The Shahid family buried Samia on the same day she died. Since the police report stated that no injuries or visible signs of violence were found on the body, her death was not considered suspicious. Hasty burials are not unusual, as Muslim traditions and Sharia law require immediate burial if there are no disputes about the cause of death. News of Samia's death spread quickly, but the reports were contradictory. Some said the young woman died from a heart attack or an asthma attack, others claimed she fell down the stairs and broke her neck. Local news agencies reported that Samia had committed suicide due to deep depression caused by the absence of children, but her family denied this claim. Ali received a call from Samia's cousin, who informed him that she had died of a heart attack. Ali initially didn't believe it, thinking it was some sick joke, that they were just trying to keep her in Pakistan. He immediately flew out to be with his wife. When he realized that Samia had indeed died, he went to the Pandori police station and declared that his wife had been murdered. Ali explained how Samia had left her first husband Shakil, and how her family was enraged by this. His story clearly changed the police's view of Samia's death. They suggested it could have been an honor killing, but they couldn't do anything since the body had already been buried. When news of the mysterious death of a young British woman spread in England, news channel representatives contacted Samia's father, Muhammad. In the interview, he insisted that his daughter was happy in her marriage and that her husband's name was Shakil. He completely denied Ali's existence, calling him a blackmailer. Eventually, Ali obtained a copy of Samia's autopsy report. It stated that a reddish-brown bruise 19 centimeters in size was found around her neck, and the cause of death was strangulation. Male sperm was also found inside her body. It is suspected that the police were initially bribed to conceal the true cause of Samia Shahid's death. Ali immediately held a press conference in Pakistan, showing the media photos of the bruise on his wife's neck. He wanted what happened to Samia to be widely known so that he could find out how she died and who was responsible. After this, Ali required round-the-clock police protection as he began receiving numerous death threats. Samia's friends in Great Britain were also actively involved. They contacted the Member of Parliament for Bradford, Nas Shah, through their acquaintances. The MP wrote directly to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, informing him about Samia's death and daring to call it an honor killing. Only after this did the Pakistani police begin a thorough investigation into Samia Shahid's death. Nas Shah's intervention had consequences. 2 people from Bradford were arrested for threatening the MP 8 days after Shakil's escape. He was found and brought in for questioning along with Samia's father, Chaudhry Muhammad. Shakil confessed that he wanted to force his wife to annul her marriage to Ali and stay with him in Pakistan. He was enraged that she had left him and prevented him from moving to Great Britain. On the morning of July 20th, he searched Samia's belongings for her passport and return ticket but found nothing. Shakil tried to stop her from returning, but Samia refused. Enraged, he pushed her onto the bed and raped her. His sperm was found inside her body. Then Samia tried to escape from the house where she had felt trapped throughout their marriage, but her ex-husband caught up with her, wrapped her scarf around her neck, and squeezed tightly. Samia's father, Muhammad, denied any involvement. This time the police didn't believe the story about a happy marriage. Investigators believed that both the Shahid family and Shakil's family felt disrespected by Samia's attempt to divorce, marry another man who wasn't a Sunni Muslim, and flee with him to Dubai, thereby ruining Shakil's chances of moving to Great Britain and disgracing the family. The problem lay in the lack of sufficient evidence. Although Samia's death was recognized as murder, it was impossible to prove who exactly killed her. In September 2018, after 2 years in custody, Shakil was released on bail. Despite his confession to the police, this was not enough for a conviction in Pakistan. In 2019, Shakil married for the second time to a British Pakistani woman and applied for a visa to enter Great Britain, as this was his ultimate goal. However, MP Naz Shah ensured that the visa was denied. After 4 months of imprisonment, Chaudhry Muhammad Shahid, Samia's father, appealed to the Supreme Court and was released due to insufficient evidence. The court found the evidence insufficient to keep him in custody. In January 2018, he was hospitalized due to kidney failure and died in a Lahore hospital at the age of 52. In October 2018, arrest warrants were issued for Samia's mother and sister, but they managed to return to Great Britain. From there, Meeta gave a completely different version of events. She claimed that their family was free and their parents never forced them into anything. Instead, according to her, Samia often complained to her about life with Ali, saying that he had taken all her money and she was living in poverty in Dubai. She even sent photos showing that her life was far from luxurious. Meeta believed that these accusations had ruined their family, tarnished their reputation, and left them in poverty due to false claims. Regardless of this, it doesn't change the tragic fact that a young woman was sent to her death at the peak of her life by those she trusted and loved. Samia Shahid's death caused widespread resonance both in Great Britain and Pakistan. This tragedy drew attention to the problem of honor killings and women's rights in some cultures. Her story became a symbol of the struggle between traditional values and the desire for personal freedom. Samia's case highlighted the complexity of cultural conflicts in the modern globalized world, where traditional practices clash with modern concepts of human rights and individual autonomy. It also highlighted the problems faced by women in some communities where family honor is considered more important than personal happiness and safety. This story leaves us with many questions about the balance between cultural traditions and personal freedom. It demonstrates how deeply rooted cultural norms can affect people's lives, especially women, even in modern Western societies. Samia's case also sparked discussions about the effectiveness of legal systems in protecting women from honor-related violence. The fact that Shakil still hasn't been convicted, despite his confession, raises questions about the fairness and effectiveness of the judicial system. The story of Samia Shahid continues to influence public opinion and policy. It has become a catalyst for discussing the need for better protection of women from honor-related violence and the importance of integrating immigrant communities in Western countries. Samia deserved a chance to make her own choices, regardless of whether she made mistakes or not. No one has the right to take someone else's life. Unfortunately, the men from the Shahid family never understood this. This tragedy underscores the need to continue the fight for women's rights and freedom of choice, especially in cultures where traditional values can limit personal freedom. Samia's story reminds us of the importance of education, dialogue between cultures, and continuous efforts to overcome harmful traditions. The memory of Samia Shahid continues to live on, reminding us of the price some women pay for their pursuit of freedom and happiness. Her story calls for greater vigilance, compassion, and action to protect vulnerable members of society. On April 27, 2024 at 2:54 p.m., a 911 dispatcher in Robeson County received an unusual call. A young woman calmly asked if they could track her location. When the dispatcher inquired about the reason, the woman replied, "I just want my family to know where to find me." After these words, the connection was lost. Around the same time, 55-year-old Johnny Jacobs was fishing on the river in Lumber River State Park, North Carolina. The park's tranquil atmosphere was disrupted by a woman's crying coming from behind a dense line of trees. "I heard faint sobbing that lasted about 2 or 3 minutes, and then it suddenly stopped," Jacobs later recalled. A few minutes later, the silence was shattered by a loud gunshot. The alarmed fisherman headed in the direction of the sound. On the riverbank, he discovered a backpack containing glasses, a phone, credit cards, a small Bible, and documents in the name of Micah Miller. At 4:30 p.m., a kayaker passing nearby noticed a body in the water. The police, called earlier due to the 911 call, pulled the body of a 30-year-old woman with a gunshot wound to the head from the river. In the parking lot, a black Honda Accord belonging to the deceased was found. On the passenger seat lay a case for a Sig Sauer pistol, a box of ammunition, and receipts dated the same day, one from a pawn shop for the purchase of a weapon, the other from a grocery store. Later, a 9mm Sig Sauer pistol was retrieved from the water, its serial number matching the case in the car. The day after the tragedy, Pastor John Paul Miller, the victim's husband, made a surprising announcement at Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. "Late last night, I received a call. My wife has passed away." It was self-induced. It happened in North Carolina. He informed his congregation, asking them to quietly leave the church and not discuss the news inside the building. He also added, "You all knew that she was not mentally healthy and needed medication." This announcement, made less than a day after the body was discovered, when the official cause of death had not yet been established, raised the first suspicions among Micah's family. But to understand the full complexity of this case, we need to go back 15 years, when Micah and John Paul's story was just beginning. Micah Miller was born in the early 90s into a loving Christian family. The girl grew up in an atmosphere of faith and devotion to the church. Her parents instilled in their daughter the values of compassion, kindness, and service to others. When Micah was about 14 years old, the family began attending Solid Rock Baptist Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. This church was distinguished by its dynamic community, where, in addition to services, a variety of events took place from cooking classes to yard sales. Solid Rock positioned itself as a second home for everyone, so the church soon became the center of life and communication for young Micah. It was here that the girl first met John Paul Miller, a charismatic 28-year-old youth pastor. Despite the age difference, a friendship developed between them. The experienced clergyman paid special attention to Micah, often talking with her after the service, taking an interest in her life. For a shy teenager who was just forming her identity, his support and guidance seemed like an invaluable gift. However, there was a noticeable power imbalance in this relationship from the beginning. John Paul, a married man and father of several children, skillfully manipulated the feelings of the young parishioner. He would shower her with compliments one moment and distance himself the next, causing confusion and a desire to please the mentor. But at that time, the naive Micah did not notice the alarming signals, mistaking the toxic attention for genuine affection. Over the next few years, John Paul increasingly took care of Micah's spiritual life. The girl confided in him her experiences and secrets, perceiving the pastor as a wise advisor. However, behind the feigned concern was a desire to strengthen control and isolate Micah from friends and family. Meanwhile, rumors spread in the church about the unusual friendship between the married pastor and the young parishioner. Some of the older members of the community tried to warn Micah against reckless trust, but the infatuated girl did not heed the voice of reason. In 2015, the relationship between John Paul and Micah reached a new level. At the pastor's request, the 18-year-old girl married his friend Jeremy Dace. John Paul himself officiated the wedding. The newlyweds settled in Myrtle Beach and immersed themselves in the life of the church. Jeremy worked in the sports ministry, while Micah helped in a Sunday school, sang in the choir, and served as John Paul's personal secretary. However, few suspected that the marriage to Jeremy was just a cover for the true romance that was secretly unfolding between the pastor and his protege. Eventually, the truth came out. Allison, John Paul's wife, caught the lovers right in their house. Stunned by the betrayal, Allison and Jeremy divorced their unfaithful spouses the following year and left the church. Only a small circle of the most devoted parishioners continued to communicate with Micah. Most condemned and shunned the young woman, considering her a homewrecker. In 2017, John Paul and Micah got married in the same Solid Rock church. Now the 23-year-old pastor's wife became a stepmother to his 5 children and his right-hand woman in church affairs. Despite the condemnation of the community, the couple radiated happiness and pretended as if nothing had happened. They dreamed of building a new life together and growing the congregation. But behind the facade of the perfect family hid a completely different reality. Marriage to John Paul dramatically changed Micah's life. Now she found herself in the midst of church activities. Micah continued to sing in the choir, did graphic design for the community's needs, and took care of women's and youth ministries. But she was most attracted to missionary work in Kenya, where Solid Rock funded religious and educational projects. Despite her busy schedule, Micah tried to be a good stepmother to John Paul's 5 children. She sincerely fell in love with his daughter Salem, often taking her shopping and doing her nails. The girl quickly became attached to her father's young wife. On the surface, the Millers' marriage looked perfect. John Paul appeared everywhere arm in arm with his smiling, beautiful wife. They led services together, hosted guests, and made plans to expand the church. It seemed that nothing foretold trouble. But behind the scenes of the happy church couple, a horrifying drama was unfolding. From the very beginning, John Paul exhibited pathologically jealous and despotic traits. He controlled Micah's every move, demanding an account of her every minute. He forbade her from meeting with friends or communicating by phone. For the slightest transgression, the pastor scolded, humiliated, and even beat his wife. Micah began to notice strange changes in John Paul's behavior. The clergyman, who constantly condemned adultery and pornography, turned out to be obsessed with sexual perversion himself. The man demanded intimacy from his wife 3 to 5 times a day. When the exhausted woman resisted, he found ways to force her to obey. John Paul even started giving Micah testosterone injections to increase her libido. The shocked woman tried to protest, but where could she go? The church, work, friends, her entire life revolved around the all-powerful pastor. So Micah was forced to silently endure the abuse, hoping that one day her husband would come to his senses. Years passed, and John Paul behaved worse and worse. He humiliated Micah in front of friends and threatened to take away the children. One time, he simply threw her things out on the street. Upon learning that his wife had complained about him, the pastor publicly accused her of having an unstable psyche. This continued until January 2023, when Micah, exhausted by the constant abuse, dared to escape from the church and her husband. She moved to her relatives in Kansas, hoping to start her life with a clean slate. At first, it seemed that the worst was behind her. Micah attended a new church, made friends, and made plans. But soon a strange thing happened. Barely a few months had passed when the woman suddenly returned to John Paul. She left her relatives brief and dry explanations like, "We made up and my husband allowed me to return home." This message bewildered her family. They knew how eagerly Micah had been waiting for a new life. Some suspected that John Paul had somehow forced her to return. However, the woman herself never spoke about the reasons for her actions. As one might expect, with the return to Myrtle Beach, the nightmare continued with renewed force. Control, manipulation, and beatings again became a terrifying routine. The desperate Micah no longer saw a way out. On social media, she shared cryptic posts where she spoke in veiled terms about bitter disappointment and pain.
So today my heart's a little heavy. I've had a lot of women that have reached out to me about situations of abuse. And I just want to tell you what a lot of people have told me lately and reminded me, because I think I forgot. I knew, but I pushed it in the back of my head just because of my situation.
But despite all the despair, the thought of salvation did not leave the tormented woman. In October 2023, she filed for divorce again. She began meticulously collecting evidence of John Paul's abuse to use in court. It seemed that the decisive moment in this exhausting war had finally come. Micah had no idea what an insidious plan her no longer beloved husband was preparing in response. In the spring of 2024, Micah was actively preparing for the divorce. She rented an apartment, got a job, and opened her own bank account. It seemed that life was gradually getting better. But John Paul had no intention of letting his wife go. He bombarded her with threatening messages, demanding that she return, promising to find her wherever she hid. One time, the enraged husband came to Micah's sister and threatened to wait outside the door with a weapon until his wife came out to him. Micah was forced to change phone numbers and hide at friends' houses. But even there, she did not feel safe. One morning, the woman discovered that her car tires were slashed. When she had to change the wheels, the mechanic found a GPS tracker under the vehicle. Someone was relentlessly tracking Micah's every move. The shocked woman went to the police again. But instead of help, she heard accusations of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. It turned out that John Paul had already managed to complain to the cops about his mentally ill wife. He even showed some papers that supposedly confirmed her diagnosis. In the end, the perpetrator himself magnanimously withdrew the complaint, explaining that he loves Micah very much and just wants to take care of her. So February passed. At the beginning of March, an alarmed Micah reached out to her sister in Kansas. She wrote that she feared for her life and felt she was being followed. It seemed to the woman that John Paul was hiring people to follow her everywhere. In response, the man insidiously resorted to his favorite tactic. He accused Micah of insanity. But this time, he went even further. He claimed that his wife was suffering from paranoia and posed a threat to herself and others. And then he simply locked her up in a psychiatric hospital. The stunned woman found herself confined to a ward, without documents or contact with her relatives. Fortunately, Micah managed to get out of the hospital after just 2 days. However, during this time, John Paul had managed to remove all the key documents from her apartment, evidence of his numerous abuses. Now she had nothing in her hands that would help prove her husband's guilt in court. But despite the devastating blow, Micah did not give up. With the help of friends, she restored access to most of the documents within 2 weeks and filed for divorce again. It seemed that this time she had finally broken free. The hearing of the case was scheduled for early June. Micah was filled with hope that very soon she would begin a new life, calm, free, happy. She did not yet know that this life would last only a month. Exactly until that April day when a desperate voice would cry out to 911 with a plea for salvation. And no one would be able to come to that plea. April 27, 2024 began quite ordinarily for Micah. Surveillance cameras recorded the woman leaving her apartment around 10 in the morning and returning half an hour later. Then events spun with breakneck speed. Micah went to a pawn shop where she purchased a pistol and ammunition. Then she stopped at a gas station and bought a drink. The search queries entered into her phone indicate that the woman was looking for a location in a national park. At 2:54 p.m., Micah called 911. The perplexed dispatcher heard only one chilling question: "Can you track my phone? I just want my family to know where to find me." The woman refused to answer any further questions. And then the connection was unexpectedly lost. Within minutes, a shot rang out in the park. Fisherman Johnny Jacobs, who was boating nearby, said he heard a woman crying before the shot. He immediately headed toward the sound and came across the bloodied body of a young woman. The police who arrived at the scene recognized the murdered woman as 30-year-old Micah Miller. She had died from a single gunshot to the head at close range. Nearby in the water, they found a Sig Sauer pistol, and on the shore was Micah's backpack with documents and a farewell note to her relatives. In the woman's car lay a box from the newly purchased weapon and a cash receipt from the pawn shop. Surveillance cameras unequivocally confirmed that Micah herself had bought the gun, as well as the drink at the gas station. No one suspicious was seen with her. The police quickly reconstructed the chronology of the last hours of Micah's life. All the evidence clearly indicated that the woman had consciously and independently committed suicide. Investigators speculated that she may have been driven to the desperate act by the unbearable suffering in her marriage and a constant psychological pressure from John Paul. However, there was a lack of direct evidence of his guilt. The cruel pastor had an ironclad alibi. On that fateful day, he was hundreds of miles away from North Carolina, at a sports event in Charleston. Numerous witnesses and camera recordings confirmed that John Paul had not left South Carolina all weekend. So, despite all the atrocities, technically he could not have been with his wife in the park, and even more so could not have shot her. By a sad coincidence, Micah took her own life just at the time when her abuser was not around. The news of Micah's sudden death shocked everyone who knew her. People could not believe that this smiling, compassionate young woman, who so sincerely helped others, could have taken her own life. Something about this story did not add up. However, John Paul's behavior immediately after the tragedy raised even more questions. Instead of rushing home or to Micah's relatives in despair, he held the Sunday service the next day as if nothing had happened. And at the end, he casually announced to the congregation about his wife's death. As if it was some minor annoyance, not a life-altering tragedy. The pastor's indifferent tone, his clumsy attempts to tie Micah's suicide to her alleged mental illness, all of this seemed strange at the very least. But investigators did not see anything extraordinary in John Paul's actions. His alibi was solid, so he could only be suspected of imprudence or soullessness. Instead, the police quickly solved the case, recognizing Micah's death as a suicide. This version was supported by the woman's pre-death call to 911, where she unequivocally spoke about her intention to end her life. The history of her search queries about the location of parks, the video recording of the weapon purchase, and the cash receipt from the pawn shop also left no doubt. All the evidence indicated that Micah had purposefully, step by step, prepared for her fatal decision. And judging by the nature of the wound point-blank to the temple, death almost certainly resulted from her own hand. After all, the autopsy did not reveal any signs of struggle or violence on the body. There were also no indications of the presence of an outside shooter. However, the relatives refused to believe this version. They knew Micah as a cheerful, strong woman, full of hopes and plans. After all, quite recently, she had been preparing for the divorce with such enthusiasm, dreaming of her long-awaited freedom. Was it all just an act, behind which hid a desire for death? No, it's impossible to believe. Parents, brothers, and sisters unanimously asserted Micah did not want and could not have voluntarily settled scores with life. They recalled her chilling prophecy shortly before her death: "If they find me with a bullet in my head, know that JP did it." These are not the words of someone preparing for suicide. The relatives pointed to the long history of domestic violence and torture that Micah had suffered at the hands of her sadistic husband. To his obsessive control, persecution, and intimidation, which did not subside until the very end. Isn't it obvious that the pastor deliberately drove the poor woman to despair, and then ran away to another state to have an alibi? Unfortunately, the police did not take these arguments into account. The system does not recognize such a crime as driving to suicide. Even the worst psychological pressure and gaslighting cannot be considered a sufficient motive for murder if there is no other evidence. No matter how terrible John Paul's abuse was, technically he remained beyond suspicion. So, after a few weeks, the case was closed. John Paul was never interrogated. He did not hear a single accusation. He did not even have to publicly justify himself for the years of harassment his wife had endured. The sadistic pastor got off scot-free. And Micah's memory was officially tarnished with the shameful stigma of suicide. Although the police put a bold period on the Millers' case, the community was not going to give up. Relatives, friends, and concerned activists continued to seek the truth. They tirelessly reviewed news feeds, engaged bloggers and volunteers to conduct their own investigation. And soon, even more horrifying secrets of John Paul surfaced. It turned out that behind the mask of a pious pastor hid a real pervert and predator. Ex-wife Allison accused him of molesting underage parishioners and a sexual obsession with prostitutes. Several women confessed that in their youth, they had experienced harassment and even direct assaults from John Paul. One of them described in detail how the drunk Holy Father once forcibly dragged her into his car. Under the scrutiny of the public, other dark spots in Miller's biography surfaced as well. It was revealed that even before meeting Micah, he had drawn Allison into a scheme to embezzle church funds. Significant donations supposedly for the needs of the community ended up in the couple's pockets. The scheme was exposed when their marriage fell apart and the offended woman started talking. These revelations were supplemented by journalistic investigations that showed the true face of Solid Rock. Former parishioners recalled strange rituals of humiliation that Miller allegedly used to re-educate the disobedient. Others spoke about financial abuse and pressure from the church leadership. Gradually, a frightening image of a totalitarian cult emerged, hiding under the guise of a home for all. However, the most bewildering information concerned the mysterious death of Christopher Skinner, the husband of John Paul's alleged mistress. In 2021, wheelchair-bound Christopher drowned in the pool under extremely strange circumstances. That tragic incident was written off as an accident. But suddenly, journalists discovered that just before, Skinner had quarreled with his wife Susie, and the reason was her too close friendship with Miller. Of course, all these revelations did not prove John Paul's guilt in Micah's murder. But they eloquently demonstrated his true nature as an insidious manipulator and deceiver. And the fact that such a predator was at large only because of a formal alibi seemed like a glaring injustice. To somehow influence the situation, Micah's relatives and friends wrote an open letter to the sheriff's office and the FBI. They pleaded for the reopening of the investigation into Micah's death to examine new evidence of John Paul's abuse. Activists staged pickets, collected signatures, and involved television. The Micah Miller case was rapidly turning into a nationwide Justice for Micah movement. Unfortunately, law enforcement was in no hurry to respond to the community's appeals. Despite the public outcry and moral condemnation, John Paul remained out of reach of the law. All his alleged crimes had happened so long ago that they fell under the statute of limitations. Formally, he was not even considered a suspect in the case of his wife's death. Disappointed by the system's indifference, Micah's relatives resorted to a last resort. In May, they filed a civil lawsuit against the pastor, accusing him of years of torture and incitement to suicide. It was an attempt to achieve at least symbolic justice and not let the perpetrator escape punishment. But did they have a chance to defeat the one who had not even been overcome by the criminal court? This still remains in question. Despite the bitterness of loss and anger at the injustice, Micah's relatives and friends tirelessly cherished her memory. They knew the world must remember this amazing woman not as a faceless victim, but as a bright, luminous personality, full of love and compassion. In May, 2 memorial events took place at once. The first was organized by the Solid Rock community. At it, John Paul delivered a moving speech, portraying his late wife as an angel who returned to God. Many people cried, some even applauded the pastor who bravely held up in the face of a terrible tragedy. But Micah's true friends understood perfectly well that this was just a mask to perpetuate the image of a holy sufferer. Therefore, the next day, they arranged their own, much more sincere commemoration ceremony on the ocean shore. There, where Micah loved to walk and dream about a better life. Gathered in a tight circle, relatives and friends shared memories of this kind, bright soul. About her sincere smile and infectious laughter. About how she always found time to listen, support, and comfort. How she believed in love to the end and strived to make the world a better place. Many recalled the prayer sessions Micah held for women in crisis situations. Her fervent, inspired appeals to God, full of faith in good and justice. No one could remain indifferent upon hearing her singing a pure, crystal voice that seemed to soar from the heavens themselves. Her girlfriends jokingly called Micah the guardian angel of their small community. It seemed that you could always come to her with your pain, your doubts, and she would definitely find a way to help, to instill hope. Even when she herself was hurting and scared. But this angel, unfortunately, could not save herself from her own tormentor. Some secretly admitted feeling guilty for not being able to recognize the trouble in time. For believing too much in the bright packaging of the ideal family and not seeing the hell that hid inside. Micah's parents did not hold back tears, recalling how they once dreamed of giving their daughter in marriage to John Paul. After all, he seemed like the perfect Christian husband, kind, responsible, devoted to the church. Could they have imagined that in reality they were handing the girl over into the hands of a sadist? However, on this day, no one wanted to give too much energy to John Paul. Everyone understood that evil had already taken too much. Now it was time to focus on the good and light that Micah left behind. And it was this light that they wanted to carry through the years. Months passed, but activists did not stop trying to achieve justice. Loud actions and flash mobs under the slogan "Justice for Micah" swept the country. The hashtag of the same name spread on social networks, under which people shared stories about domestic violence and called for change. The Micah Miller case prompted many women and men to speak openly for the first time about their own experiences of abuse. Some dared to escape from their abusers and start a new life. Others found the strength to testify in court against their tyrants. So, invisibly and quietly, Micah continued to save those who needed it. But despite the noble intentions, the movement to reopen the case has not yet brought the desired results. The system remained deaf to the pleas of relatives and the public. John Paul, although he lost his position in the church, avoided any responsibility for his actions. He still remained at large and even, rumor has it, planned to open a new church. However, no matter how bitter it is to realize, even the punishment of John Paul will not bring Micah back to life. It will not lift the burden of grief from the hearts of her loved ones, will not fill the void of loss. But perhaps it can protect others, those unknown girls who risked becoming the next victims of the predator pastor. Therefore, the Micah Miller case is not over. Until justice is restored, until the abuser is free, until thousands of other Micahs suffer in homes, the fight must continue. And let it be a tribute to the memory of that bright, pure soul who paid the highest price for her desire for happiness. The story of Micah Miller is a tragedy that, unfortunately, is not isolated in our world. Like thousands of other women, Micah became a victim of domestic violence, insidious, toxic, all-consuming. Her abuser resorted to the most sophisticated forms of abuse for years, from beatings and humiliation to gaslighting and psychological terror. But perhaps the most terrifying thing about this story is how easily the sadist managed to hide behind the mask of a respected pastor. John Paul was a master of manipulation. He knew how to inspire trust and respect. And he shamelessly abused this, turning God's word into a weapon against a defenseless victim. The Micah Miller case also exposed another sad truth: society's unpreparedness to adequately counter domestic violence. Too often, victims are left alone with their pain, too often their pleas for help go unheard. And abusers, especially influential and wealthy ones, get off scot-free. But this story should also be a call to action. Society must learn to recognize the alarming signals sent by victims of abuse. Never ignore their words, even if everything looks perfect from the outside. After all, in the hell of violence, there is no logic, fear reigns there. The state and law enforcement, in turn, are obliged to revise their approaches to investigating cases related to domestic violence. The practice of kicking out victims and placing responsibility for the actions of abusers on them should be a thing of the past. Instead, we need a clear algorithm for protecting and supporting the victims. And certainly inevitable punishment for tyrants. If anything good can come out of this tragedy, it is change. Changes in society's attitude towards the problem of violence, changes in church practices, changes in the justice system. And these changes must happen today. Otherwise, tomorrow we will again read in the news about someone's stolen fate and shattered dreams. So let the story of Micah Miller become not just a sad page in the crime chronicle, but an impetus for action. Let each of us think about how we can help those who suffer from violence. Even the smallest step of compassion and support can restore a victim's faith in life. And maybe someday it will save someone's bright angel from perishing in the claws of a predator.
Montreal, 1975. The city, sprawling on the banks of the St. Lawrence River, was bustling with life. The streets were filled with the sounds of French and English, creating a unique atmosphere of cultural diversity. Spring was gradually taking hold, and city dwellers were eagerly awaiting warmth after the long Canadian winter. In the southwestern part of the city lay the district of Pointe Saint-Charles, or simply the Point, as it was affectionately called by locals. This was one of the oldest neighborhoods in Montreal, with a rich history and a tight-knit community. Here, everyone knew their neighbor, and children played carefree in the streets until late in the evening. No one suspected that this quiet, peaceful corner of Montreal would soon become the site of a tragedy that would shake the entire city and remain an unsolved mystery for decades to come. Sharon Kim Pryor was born on February 9, 1959, to Yvonne and George Pryor. Yvonne, originally from England, had moved to Canada as a child with her parents. There, she met George, who served in the Canadian Armed Forces. The young couple fell in love quickly, got married, and Sharon became their firstborn. From early childhood, Sharon showed extraordinary kindness and caring. She adored animals and often brought home stray kittens and puppies which she fed and nursed. This love for our smaller brothers defined her dream: to become a veterinarian. At school, Sharon was a diligent student, albeit a bit shy. She found her passion in sports, joining the Boys and Girls Club where she played floor hockey. Besides sports, the girl was fascinated by art and crafts. Despite her parents' divorce in 1965, Sharon remained a cheerful child. She helped her mother take care of her younger twin sisters, Doreen and Maureen, and brother Georgie. The family settled in the Pointe Saint-Charles area, where Sharon quickly gained a reputation as a responsible and kind girl. In her teenage years, Sharon, like many of her peers, became fascinated with music, especially the work of Elton John. She started dating a boy named John, whom she had been in love with since 4th grade. Life seemed beautiful, and the future looked promising for young Sharon Pryor. Saturday, March 29, 1975, began as an ordinary spring day. Sharon woke up early, as always. She made her bed and went down to the kitchen, where her mother, Yvonne, was already preparing breakfast. There was a special excitement in the air that day. Easter was approaching and the Pryor family was preparing for the celebration. After breakfast, Sharon helped her mother clear the table. Yvonne still had a lot to do. She needed to buy groceries for the holiday dinner and gifts for the children. While her mother was out, Sharon decided to paint eggs for her younger siblings. The girl carefully prepared paints and decorations. She boiled 8 eggs and started painting them, trying to make each one special. When Yvonne returned from the store, Sharon was still immersed in her task. She had managed to paint only half of each egg, leaving them to dry so she could finish the work later. Around 3:45 p.m., Sharon told her mother that she was going to the Boys and Girls Club to pick up her Leo's Boys jacket. This jacket was special. It was given to children who had sold a certain number of lottery tickets to support the club. Sharon had worked hard to earn this jacket and was now eagerly waiting for it. Unfortunately, when Sharon arrived at the club, it turned out that jackets in her size were not available. This upset the girl, but she didn't show it. Instead, she took a jacket for her friend and dropped it off at her house. Returning home, Sharon continued painting eggs. At 4:30 p.m., a local priest visited them, bringing the children a box of chocolate candies in the shape of turtles. The next 45 minutes were spent talking about Easter while Sharon finished her work. In the evening, the whole family, Sharon, her mother Yvonne, younger sisters and brother, grandmother, and Doug, the man Yvonne was dating, sat down for dinner. Yvonne had prepared a stew, which the children didn't really like but ate anyway. After dinner, Sharon helped wash the dishes and then asked permission to go to Marina's Pizzeria, a popular hangout for teenagers, which was only 5 blocks from their house. Yvonne didn't object. She trusted her responsible daughter. Around 6 p.m., a friend came to Sharon to spend time with her while she was getting ready. The girls talked and joked while Sharon was choosing what to wear. Eventually, she borrowed a sweater from her mother and put on her favorite suede jacket. At 7 p.m., Sharon said goodbye to her mother and left the house with her friend. It was drizzling outside, and Sharon was a bit worried about her suede jacket, but Yvonne reassured her, saying it was just a light rain. No one could have predicted that this would be the last time Yvonne saw her daughter alive. When the clock struck 11 p.m. and Sharon still hadn't returned home, Yvonne began to worry. This was uncharacteristic of her daughter. She always adhered to curfew, or at least called if she was running late. Yvonne tried to calm herself with the thought that Sharon might have been so engrossed in conversation with friends that she lost track of time. At 1:30 a.m., Yvonne's concern grew into real panic. She stood by the living room window, peering into the darkness, hoping to see her daughter's approaching silhouette. Sharon's younger sisters, Doreen and Maureen, were also awake, looking out from their second-floor bedroom window. When morning came, and Sharon still hadn't returned, Yvonne began calling her friends. None of them had seen Sharon the previous evening. She hadn't shown up at Marina's Pizzeria as planned. Friends suggested she might have gone to a hockey game with John and his company, but when they contacted them, it turned out Sharon wasn't there either. Yvonne's heart sank when she received a call from Sharon's friend, Mary. She reported disturbing news. Around 7:30 p.m., not far from the pizzeria, a 23-year-old woman named Cheryl Roy had been attacked by an unknown man with a knife. Fortunately, the attacker was scared off by a passerby. The description of the criminal, a white man with blue eyes and a mustache, dressed in a dark blue jacket and black shoes, made Yvonne's blood run cold. Without wasting time, Yvonne went to the police. Soon, the entire neighborhood was on its feet. Hundreds of volunteers, neighbors, friends, just concerned Montreal residents, took to the streets to help search for Sharon. They put up flyers with her photo, questioned passers-by, searched parks and abandoned buildings. Yvonne appeared on television, begging those who might be holding her daughter to return her home safe and sound. Her emotional appeal touched the hearts of many viewers, and the number of volunteers joining the search increased. The police thoroughly questioned everyone who might have seen Sharon that evening. They checked alibis of suspects, analyzed surveillance camera footage, although there weren't many in 1975, tried to reconstruct the girl's route. Days passed, but no traces of Sharon were found. Some began to suggest that she might have run away from home, but family and close friends categorically rejected this version. Sharon had no reason to run away. She loved her family, had good relationships with friends and her boyfriend. Moreover, she hadn't taken any money or personal belongings with her. Tension in the Pointe Saint-Charles area grew with each passing day. Parents were afraid to let their children out on the street. Neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. A place that had always been considered safe suddenly became a source of fear and uncertainty. The morning of April 1st, 1975 began for Yvonne Pryor, like the previous days, with anxious anticipation. At 6 o'clock in the morning, she noticed an acquaintance named Ronnie knocking on the neighbor's door. He had a newspaper under his arm. Sensing something was wrong, Yvonne went out into the street. Without saying a word, she snatched the newspaper from Ronnie's hands. He shouted, "No, Yvonne, don't look." But it was too late. On the front page, Yvonne saw a photo of a body found in the snow. Although the face wasn't visible, the mother immediately recognized her daughter's shoes. Sharon's body was discovered early that morning by beekeeper Jacques Bertrand in Longueuil, a city on the opposite bank of the St. Lawrence River, about 25 minutes' drive from Pointe Saint-Charles. Bertrand had come to check on his apiary after a report of open gates and found the girl's body. The police quickly cordoned off the crime scene. Sharon was dressed only in a suede jacket and blue sweater, with socks and shoes on her feet. Her jeans were lying a few meters away from the body, and her underwear was hanging on a nearby branch. In the girl's hair, they found a partially chewed ribbon, possibly used as a gag. In Sharon's hand, she was tightly clutching a branch, indicating her desperate struggle for life. Investigators found several important pieces of evidence. 15 meters from the body, they discovered tire tracks and a bloody trail leading to where Sharon was lying. The absence of drag marks and dirt on the victim's shoes indicated that she was likely carried from a vehicle. Near the body, they found a man's shirt size 17 with 34-inch sleeves, which they believed was used to tie the victim's hands. By the gate, they found a clear imprint of a right shoe size 8.5. They also found a receipt for a Leo's Boys jacket with Sharon Pryor's name on it. This horrific discovery shocked the entire Montreal community. The dreams and hopes of a young girl, her plans for the future, all of this was ruthlessly destroyed. Now, investigators face the task of finding the person responsible for this terrible crime. After the discovery of Sharon Pryor's body, the Montreal police launched a large-scale investigation. Detectives carefully examined every detail, trying to piece together a complete picture of what happened on the night of March 29th to 30th. The autopsy results showed that death occurred approximately 20 hours before the body was discovered. This meant that Sharon had been held somewhere for several days. Experts found numerous injuries on the girl's body, including signs of sexual violence. The cause of death was strangulation. Investigators focused on analyzing evidence found at the crime scene. The shirt, likely used to tie Sharon's hands, was sent for examination. The shoe print and tire tracks were carefully studied and compared with databases. The police conducted hundreds of interviews. They talked to Sharon's friends, her classmates, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen her on the day of her disappearance. Special attention was paid to Cheryl Roy, the victim of an attack that occurred shortly before Sharon's disappearance. Her testimony could be key to solving the case. One of the first suspects was Frank Daly, the manager of Marina's Pizzeria. He was interrogated but had an alibi for the time of Sharon's disappearance. They also checked Jacques Bertrand, the beekeeper who found the body, and his partner, Roger Auger. Although their suspicions were dismissed, the police continued to thoroughly check everyone who might have been involved in the crime. Investigators developed a profile of the likely perpetrator. They believed it could be a young man, aged 20 to 30, possibly a local resident. They suspected he had a criminal past, and this was likely not his first crime. Despite intensive investigation, progress was slow. Each new day without a decisive clue increased the likelihood that the case might remain unsolved. Meanwhile, the Pointe Saint-Charles community was in shock. The neighborhood, known for its safety and friendly atmosphere, suddenly became the site of a terrible crime. Parents were afraid to let their children out on the street, and neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. On April 4th, 1975, Sharon's funeral was held. More than 200 people gathered at St. Matthew's Church to say goodbye to the girl whose life had ended so tragically. Yvonne Pryor, leaning on the support of family and friends, tried to stay strong, but her grief was immeasurable. The police continued to work on the case, promising not to stop until the culprit was found. But as weeks and then months passed without significant progress, hope for a quick resolution of the crime began to fade. After the intensive initial investigation, the Sharon Pryor case gradually moved into the cold case category. Despite police efforts, no decisive evidence was found that would allow them to identify and arrest the killer. Over the next few years, investigators periodically returned to the case, checking new leads and versions. They continued to interview potential witnesses, analyze old evidence in light of new forensic methods, but a breakthrough did not come. For the Pryor family, these years were filled with pain and uncertainty. Yvonne, Sharon's mother, never lost hope for solving the crime. She regularly approached the police, reminding them about her daughter's case, and sought any new information that could help the investigation. Sharon's sisters, Doreen and Maureen, grew up in the shadow of tragedy. They tried to live normal lives, but the absence of their sister and the pain of her loss were always present. The younger brother, Georgie, who was still little at the time of Sharon's death, grew up knowing his older sister only from stories and photographs. In 1981, 6 years after Sharon's death, another tragedy occurred that reminded people of the unsolved case. 12-year-old Tammy Leakey disappeared just a few blocks from where Sharon was last seen. Her body was found the next day, and the circumstances of her death were very similar to Sharon's case. This sparked speculation about a possible serial killer operating in the area, and again drew attention to Sharon's unsolved case. During these years, several other unsolved murders of young women occurred in and around Montreal. Each such case made investigators return to Sharon's case, looking for possible connections. In the 1990s, the development of DNA analysis technologies gave new hope for solving old cases. However, when investigators tried to apply these methods to Sharon's case, they faced a problem. Many physical pieces of evidence collected at the crime scene had been lost or destroyed over years of storage. Despite this, Yvonne Pryor did not give up. She became an activist, advocating for better investigation methods and evidence preservation in murder cases. Her story inspired other families of unsolved crime victims to unite and demand justice for their loved ones. In 1995, on the 20th anniversary of Sharon's death, a local newspaper published a large article about the case. This again drew public attention to the unsolved murder and forced the police to review all case materials once more. At the end of the 1990s, as the new millennium approached, the Sharon Pryor case remained one of the most famous unsolved cases in Montreal's history. It became a symbol of unfinished justice and a reminder of how one act of violence can forever change the lives of many people. But even after so many years without answers, hope still flickered. New technologies and investigation methods that were emerging gave reason to believe that one day the truth about what happened to Sharon Pryor would finally be revealed. With the dawn of the new millennium, new hope emerged in the Sharon Pryor case. The development of DNA analysis technologies opened up new possibilities for solving old, cold cases. In 2000, Yvonne Pryor approached the police with a request to review the evidence in her daughter's case using new DNA analysis methods. To her great disappointment, it turned out that most of the physical evidence collected in 1975 had been lost or destroyed. This was a painful blow for the family and caused public outrage. However, not all was lost. Some of Sharon's clothing items and the man's shirt found at the crime scene had been preserved. In 2001, these items were sent for DNA analysis. Experts managed to isolate a DNA profile that didn't belong to Sharon. This was the first real breakthrough in the case in many years. In 2004, the police received anonymous information about a garage where Sharon was allegedly held. A thorough search was conducted, DNA samples were taken, but unfortunately, they didn't match the profile found on the victim's clothing. Throughout this decade, investigators continued to work on the case, using new forensic methods. They reviewed old testimonies, looked for new witnesses, analyzed similar crimes that had occurred in the region. In 2007, a special unit was created to investigate unsolved murders in the Montreal area. The Sharon Pryor case was one of the priorities for this group. They began systematically reviewing all aspects of the case, using modern profiling and evidence analysis methods. 2008 brought another glimmer of hope. Thanks to advancements in DNA analysis technologies, experts managed to obtain a more complete genetic profile of the perpetrator from the available evidence. This profile was entered into the National DNA Database, but no matches were found. Despite the lack of a decisive breakthrough, these years brought renewed interest in the case and new possibilities for solving it. Yvonne Pryor and her family continued their fight for justice, appearing in the media and working with organizations that support families of unsolved crime victims. By the end of the decade, although Sharon's killer still remained unknown, there was real hope that with the development of technologies and the tireless work of investigators, this long saga might finally find its conclusion. The second decade of the 21st century brought revolutionary changes in the methods of investigating cold cases. The key factor was the emergence of genetic genealogy, a method that combines traditional DNA analysis with the study of family histories and public genealogical databases. In 2012, an anonymous donor increased the reward for information about Sharon Pryor's killer to $10,000. This led to the creation of a new dedicated phone line for receiving information and renewed public interest in the case. In 2015, investigators decided to apply the genetic genealogy method to Sharon's case. The DNA profile obtained from the evidence was compared with data from public genealogical databases. Although no direct match was found, this work provided some clues about possible family connections of the perpetrator. In 2018, a new detective assigned to work on the case began a systematic review of all evidence and testimonies. He paid special attention to Sharon's genes, which had not been fully analyzed before due to technological limitations of that time. 2019 brought an important breakthrough. Thanks to advanced DNA analysis methods, experts managed to obtain a more complete genetic profile from Sharon's genes. This profile turned out to be identical to the one found on the man's shirt from the crime scene, but now it was much more detailed. In 2020, using this updated profile and genetic genealogy methods, investigators were able to narrow down the circle of suspects to several families. They began a thorough investigation of the genealogical trees of these families, looking for potential suspects who matched the killer's profile. 2021 became decisive. Y chromosome DNA analysis of the perpetrator pointed to a family with the surname Romaine. Investigators focused their attention on men from this family who could have been in Montreal in 1975. This work required enormous effort and time. Investigators reviewed old address books, school records, employment documents, trying to find a connection between the Romaine family and Montreal in the mid-1970s. By the end of 2021, investigators had a list of several potential suspects. They began the process of elimination, checking alibis and gathering additional information about each of them. Although the case still remained unsolved, the feeling that the resolution was close was stronger than ever in the past 46 years. Yvonne Pryor, who was now over 80, waited with hope for news that could finally bring her and her family long-awaited relief. 2022 became a turning point in the Sharon Pryor case. The intensive work of investigators focused on the Romaine family finally brought results. In June, detectives discovered that one of the Romaine brothers, Franklin May Westover Romaine, had a criminal past and was in Montreal in 1975. Born in 1946 in West Virginia, Franklin had a long history of offenses, including theft and assault. Further investigation showed that in February 1974, Franklin was arrested for assaulting a woman in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Released on bail, he fled to Canada, where he continued his criminal activities. Investigators found 2 addresses in Montreal associated with Franklin Romaine. One was approximately 10 kilometers from Sharon's home, and the other was in the area where her body was found. This matched the profile of the killer, who knew the area well. It was also established that Franklin drove a dark red Rambler car. Experts confirmed that the tire tracks found at the crime scene could belong to such a vehicle. Franklin's physical description, a tall man with a mustache and reddish hair, matched the description of the attacker who assaulted Cheryl Roy shortly before Sharon's disappearance. In December 2022, 2 of Franklin's brothers, Noah and Michael Romaine, agreed to provide samples of their DNA for analysis. The results showed a partial match with the DNA found on Sharon's clothing. Genetic analysis indicated that with a probability of 1 in 140 billion, their brother Franklin was the sought-after killer. Noah and Michael were not surprised by this discovery. They described Franklin as a violent person with whom they were never close. Family relationships finally deteriorated after Franklin tried to attack one of the brothers' wives. However, there was one problem. Franklin Romaine had died in 1982 at the age of 36 under unclear circumstances. His body was buried in West Virginia. For final confirmation of the killer's identity, investigators turned to West Virginia authorities with a request to allow exhumation of Franklin Romaine's body to obtain a DNA sample. This discovery was a huge breakthrough in a case that had remained unsolved for almost 5 decades. For the Pryor family, it was a mixture of relief and pain. They finally knew the name of the person responsible for Sharon's death, but also realized that he had escaped justice, dying many years ago. 2023 brought the long-awaited conclusion to the Sharon Pryor case. After obtaining a court order, on May 2nd, Franklin Romaine's body was exhumed at Pine Grove Cemetery in West Virginia. The exhumation procedure was complicated due to the close proximity of Franklin's grave to his mother's. Investigators worked with utmost caution to avoid disturbing neighboring burials. Samples of Franklin Romaine's bone tissue were sent to a laboratory in Canada for DNA analysis. Experts were able to obtain a complete genetic profile and compare it with the DNA found on Sharon Pryor's clothing. On May 23, 2023, the Montreal police officially announced the resolution of the case. Franklin Romaine's DNA fully matched the DNA of Sharon Pryor's killer. The probability of error was virtually zero. This discovery allowed authorities to link Romaine to at least 4 rapes committed during his lifetime. Investigators also suspected his involvement in other unsolved murders, both in the United States and Canada. For the Pryor family, this news was a moment of mixed emotions. 85-year-old Yvonne Pryor, upon hearing about the case being solved, broke into tears but said she felt relief from finally knowing the truth. Sharon's sisters, Doreen and Maureen, expressed gratitude to the police and genetic genealogy experts for their tireless work. They noted that while this wouldn't bring their sister back, knowing that her killer could no longer harm anyone brought some comfort. At the press conference, the Pryor family stated, "We still mourn the loss of our daughter and sister who was brutally murdered at the age of 16. Our life since then has not been easy, but Sharon has given us strength over the past 48 years, and especially today. Sharon is here with us." The solving of Sharon Pryor's case became a symbol of hope for many families whose loved ones were victims of unsolved crimes. It demonstrated that even after decades of uncertainty, justice can prevail. Franklin May Westover Romaine was born in 1946 in West Virginia. His life was filled with legal troubles from an early age. Already in his teenage years, he began committing petty thefts and robberies. In 1964 and 1965, Romaine escaped from prison twice, demonstrating his disregard for the law. His crimes were mostly limited to burglaries and robberies, but in February 1974, he crossed a line by attacking a woman in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Released on bail, Romaine fled to Canada to avoid trial. In Montreal, he continued his criminal activities. It was during this period, in March 1975, that Sharon Pryor's murder occurred. In October 1975, 6 months after Sharon's murder, Romaine was arrested and extradited back to West Virginia. In 1978, he was sentenced to a term of 5 to 10 years in prison for the 1974 assault. However, Romaine was released early in 1981, having already served the minimum term, taking into account the time spent in jail before trial. After his release, he briefly returned to Canada. In 1982, at the age of only 36, Franklin Romaine died under unclear circumstances. His body was returned to West Virginia for burial. Romaine's life was filled with violence and crime. His own family described him as a cruel person whom everyone avoided. An attempt to attack one of his brother's wives finally alienated him from his family. The revelation of his involvement in Sharon Pryor's murder showed how dangerous he was. Investigators suspect that he might have been responsible for other unsolved crimes both in the United States and Canada. Franklin Romaine's story is a tragic example of how one person can bring so much grief and suffering to others, remaining undetected for decades. The official announcement of solving Sharon Pryor's case triggered a wave of emotions in the family and the entire Montreal community. For Yvonne Pryor, Sharon's mother, it was a moment of long-awaited relief. At 85 years old, she finally got the answers she had been seeking for almost 5 decades. "I always knew this day would come," she told journalists, barely holding back tears. Sharon's sisters, Doreen and Maureen, expressed mixed feelings. "We're grateful for the tireless work of the police and experts, but this doesn't bring Sharon back," they stated. However, knowing that her killer can no longer harm anyone brings some comfort. The Pointe Saint-Charles community, which remembered the 1975 tragedy, reacted with deep sympathy for the Pryor family. Many local residents left flowers near the Pryors' former home as a sign of respect for Sharon's memory. The Montreal police held a press conference where they detailed the investigation process and the role of genetic genealogy in solving the case. Detectives emphasized the importance of new technologies in solving cold cases. Criminology and genetics experts commented on this case as an example of how modern methods can help restore justice even decades after a crime. The solving of Sharon Pryor's case became a symbol of hope for many families whose loved ones were victims of unsolved crimes. It served as a reminder of the importance of not giving up and continuing to seek the truth, regardless of how much time has passed. Local politicians used this opportunity to call for increased funding for investigating cold cases and implementing new technologies in law enforcement work. Overall, the resolution of Sharon Pryor's case became a moment of collective catharsis for a community that had lived with this unresolved tragedy for decades. The solving of Sharon Pryor's murder after 48 years of uncertainty left a deep mark on society and the criminal justice system. This case became a catalyst for changes in legislation and police practice. New laws were passed requiring better preservation of evidence in murder cases to avoid losing important clues, as happened in Sharon's case. The success of using genetic genealogy led to increased funding and expanded application of this technology for solving other cold cases. Many police departments across Canada created special units dedicated to such long, unsolved crimes. The memory of Sharon Pryor continues to live on. An annual scholarship in her name, established by the Boys and Girls Club, helps young people fulfill their dreams of higher education. Sharon's story has become the subject of several books and documentaries, which not only tell about the tragedy but also emphasize the importance of relentless pursuit of justice and the development of forensic technologies. For the Pryor family, solving the case brought long-awaited closure, but also reminded them of the undiminished pain of loss. They continue to advocate for other families of unsolved crime victims, giving them hope and support. The Sharon Pryor case will forever remain a reminder that time is not an obstacle to justice, and that even the oldest and most complex crimes can be solved through persistence, dedication, and innovation. On the night of October 9, 2012, darkness fell over the small college town of Dover, New Hampshire. The streets were quiet, with only an occasional car passing by. At this time, 19-year-old Lizzie Marriott, a student at the University of New Hampshire, was returning home after a party. She didn't know that this night would be the last of her life. Lizzie was a bright, cheerful girl with big plans for the future. She dreamed of becoming a marine biologist and was already taking the first steps toward achieving that dream. However, fate had a different scenario in store for her, one that would soon shake the entire city and force many to reconsider their views on human nature. Elizabeth Lizzie Marriott was born on June 10, 1993 in the city of Westborough, Massachusetts. She grew up in a loving family with a younger brother. From early childhood, Lizzie showed a special love for animals, especially aquatic creatures. Lizzie's parents, Bob and Melissa Marriott, always supported their daughter's interests. They often took her on trips to aquariums and the coast, where little Lizzie watched the marine life with fascination. This childhood curiosity later grew into a serious passion for marine biology. In school, Lizzie was an excellent student and actively participated in various extracurricular activities. She was a member of the Scout movement, where she learned responsibility and teamwork. These qualities, along with her natural kindness and openness, made Lizzie a favorite among both peers and teachers. Graduating from high school in 2011 was an important milestone for Lizzie. She was chosen as the prom queen, which testified to her popularity and respect among classmates. New horizons and opportunities were opening up ahead, and Lizzie was ready to conquer them. After graduating from high school, Lizzie entered the University of New Hampshire, where she began studying marine biology. The choice of university was not accidental. The institution was famous for its marine science program and proximity to the ocean, which gave students the opportunity for practical experience. Lizzie was full of enthusiasm. She dreamed of exploring the oceans and making scientific discoveries. In parallel with her studies, the girl volunteered at the Boston Aquarium, where she conducted tours for visitors. This work not only gave her practical experience, but also allowed her to share her passion for marine life with others. To be closer to the university and save on housing rent, Lizzie moved in with her uncle and aunt in the town of Chester, New Hampshire. This decision demonstrated her desire for independence and willingness to sacrifice comfort for the sake of education. The fall of 2012 marked the beginning of a new stage in Lizzie's life. She transferred to the second year of the University of New Hampshire, where she was immediately enrolled in the marine biology program. The first day at the new educational institution was full of excitement and anticipation. Lizzie quickly found common ground with her classmates, who were attracted by her sincere smile and positive attitude toward life. Teachers noted her enthusiasm and deep interest in the subject. Lizzie actively participated in discussions, asked questions, and was always ready for new challenges. In addition to studying, the girl got a part-time job as a manager at the Target store. This work not only helped her financially, but also developed her communication and teamwork skills. Colleagues characterized Lizzie as a friendly, communicative girl who never refused to help. It seemed that all doors were opening before Lizzie, and the future promised to be bright and successful. However, fate had an unexpected twist in store for her, which would forever change the lives of many people. At her job at Target, Lizzie met 18-year-old Kat McDonnell. The girls quickly found common ground, despite some differences in their characters. If Lizzie was open and sociable, then Kat seemed more withdrawn and reserved. Colleagues noticed that after starting a relationship with a new boyfriend, Kat changed. She became less communicative, limited communication with friends, and even stopped contacting her family. However, Lizzie, with her natural kindness, did not pay attention to these changes and continued to support the friendship. The girls often spent time together after work, discussing their dreams and plans for the future. Lizzie shared her passion for marine biology, and Kat talked about her interest in theater. This friendship seemed ordinary for two young girls, but soon it would lead to tragic consequences. Soon, Lizzie met Kat's boyfriend, 30-year-old Seth Mazzalia. Seth was a graduate of the same University of New Hampshire where Lizzie studied, but with a degree in theater arts. He also had experience working as an ambulance paramedic and had a black belt in karate. At first glance, Seth seemed like an interesting and versatile personality. He worked as a consultant in an electronics store and taught martial arts. However, behind this facade hid a dark side of his nature. Seth and Kat met a year ago in a theater when the girl was only 17. Immediately after her 18th birthday, Seth proposed that Kat live with him. They settled in Mazzadlia's apartment in the city of Dover, New Hampshire. Few people knew, but the couple practiced BDSM relationships, where Seth acted as the dominant and Kat as the fully submissive. They even posted ads on specialized sites looking for a third participant for their games. These details will become important for understanding the subsequent events. October 9th, 2012 began like a normal day for Lizzie Marriott. She attended classes at the university and then worked a few hours at Target. In the evening, Lizzie decided to go to a party with her friend Liz Pace. The girls carefully prepared for the outing. They did their makeup, styled their hair, and chose the appropriate clothes. According to Liz, they had a good time at the party, dancing, chatting with friends, and enjoying the atmosphere. Around 4 o'clock in the morning on October 10th, Lizzie drove Liz home in her white 1994 Honda Accord. However, instead of going home herself, Lizzie said she had some other business to attend to. She hugged her friend goodbye, not suspecting that this would be their last meeting. After saying goodbye to Liz, Lizzie decided to visit Kat McDonnell. She wrote a note to her uncle and aunt, informing them that she was going to a friend's house and would return by midnight. This decision proved fatal for the young girl. Lizzie arrived at Kat and Seth's apartment around 9 o'clock in the morning on October 10th. She didn't know that Seth would be home and that the couple had their own plans for her. According to Kat, who later gave testimony during the investigation, Seth had seen pictures of Lizzie in advance and liked her. At first, everything seemed innocent. The three young people sat, talked, watched a movie. However, the atmosphere gradually changed. Seth suggested playing strip poker, creating a favorable atmosphere for intimacy. Lizzie, who trusted her friends, agreed, not suspecting the danger that awaited her. The situation in Seth and Kat's apartment quickly got out of control. When Lizzie lost a few rounds of poker and was left in only her underwear, Seth suggested that she kiss Kat. Lizzie categorically refused, explaining that she was in a serious relationship and did not want to cheat on her partner. Lizzie's refusal infuriated Seth. He went into another room where he put on black leather gloves and took a rope. Returning, Seth suddenly threw the rope around Lizzie's neck and began strangling her. Kat, who later claimed to have been shocked and frightened, did nothing to help Lizzie. Lizzie fought for her life, but could not resist the physically stronger Seth. After a few minutes, she stopped showing signs of life. Seth, having made sure that Lizzie was dead, committed a sexual assault on her body. Realizing that they had committed murder, Seth and Kat panicked. They decided to get rid of the body and destroy all evidence. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, the couple wrapped Lizzie's body in a tarp and placed it in a suitcase. Using Lizzie's car, they took the body to Pierce Island in Portsmouth, where the Piscataqua River flows. Seth and Kat dragged the suitcase to an observation deck, pulled out Lizzie's body, and threw it off a cliff into the river. After that, they thoroughly washed Lizzie's car, trying to destroy all traces of the crime. The car was left in the university campus parking lot, and they walked home themselves, covering a distance of about 10 miles. The next day, the couple continued to destroy evidence. They threw away Lizzie's personal belongings and other items associated with the crime. Seth broke Lizzie's phone and threw it away on the way home. On October 10th, Lizzie failed to show up for work at Target, which caused concern among her colleagues. They contacted Lizzie's father, Thomas Antonakos, to find out if everything was okay with the girl. Thomas, who had not been able to contact his daughter since the previous evening, began to worry. Lizzie's aunt and uncle, with whom she lived in Chester, initially assumed that the girl could have stayed with a friend. However, when Lizzie did not return the next day, their concern grew. Meanwhile, Seth and Kat tried to act as usual. Seth even offered to help search for Lizzie, trying to deflect suspicion from himself. Kat remained silent, fearing the consequences and Seth's threats. On October 11th, when it became clear that Lizzie had disappeared, her parents immediately went to Chester. On the way, they called the police and reported their daughter's disappearance. Thomas Antonikos, a successful businessman, immediately began his own investigation. He visited places Lizzie frequented, talked to her friends and acquaintances. Unfortunately, no one could provide substantial information about the girl's whereabouts. Lizzie's parents announced a reward of $10,000 for information about their daughter's whereabouts. They hoped this would help speed up the search and obtain important leads. The New Hampshire police launched an active investigation into Lizzie Marriott's disappearance. Initially, investigators suggested that the girl might have been in a car accident, but this version was quickly dismissed. Detectives interviewed all of Lizzie's friends and acquaintances. During these interviews, it turned out that the last person to see Lizzie was her friend, Kat McDonnell. This drew investigators' attention to Kat and her boyfriend, Seth Mazzaglia. An important lead was information about the last location of Lizzie's phone. The signal was recorded in the city of Dover at 10:11 p.m. on October 9th, not far from where Kat and Seth lived. On October 14th, Lizzie's car was found in the university campus parking lot. The car was empty, and no traces of a struggle or other evidence of crime were found in it. The disappearance of a young student quickly attracted the attention of local media. News about Lizzie Marriott appeared on the front pages of newspapers and in the main news releases. Journalists interviewed Lizzie's parents, her friends, and teachers. Everyone described the girl as a kind, responsible, and purposeful person who could not just disappear. Media attention helped spread information about Lizzie's disappearance to the general public. This led to an increase in calls to the police hotline from people who thought they might have seen the girl. However, the increased press attention also created additional pressure on investigators and complicated the conduct of some operational measures. A few days after Lizzie's disappearance, the police summoned Seth Mazzaglia and Kat McDonnell for questioning. The couple was interrogated separately, which allowed investigators to compare their testimonies. Kat denied that Lizzie had visited them on October 9th. She insisted that she had not seen her friend on the day of her disappearance. Kat's interrogation lasted about 2 hours, after which she refused to continue the conversation and remained waiting for Seth at the police station. Seth, unlike Kat, told a completely different story. He admitted that Lizzie had indeed come to them that evening. According to him, they had a threesome, and in the process, he tied the girls up with ropes. Seth claimed that at some point something went wrong and Lizzie accidentally died. Seth's interrogation lasted 11 hours. He said that after Lizzie's death, he and Kat took her body to the Piscataqua River and threw it into the water. Seth even agreed to go with the police to the place where they disposed of the body. After Seth's confession, investigators conducted a thorough search of the couple's apartment and the surrounding area. In a garbage container near the house, a package with men's underwear, a pair of black leather gloves, and Lizzie's sweater were found. An examination revealed traces of Seth and Lizzie's DNA on the underwear, confirming their close contact. This evidence contradicted Kat's initial testimony and cast doubt on her version of events. Meanwhile, the police continued their search for Lizzie's body in the Piscataqua River. Divers and special equipment were involved, but the strong current and difficult bottom relief complicated the work. Under the pressure of evidence, Kat changed her testimony. She recorded a video confession in which she confirmed that Lizzie was in their apartment on October 9th. According to her, they did indeed play strip poker, after which the situation turned intimate. However, Kat claimed that Lizzie died from accidental strangulation during sex games. Further investigation revealed even more shocking details of the crime. An analysis of phone records showed that Seth and Kat had planned to find a third participant for their sex games several weeks before the tragedy. During a new interrogation in 2014, Kat finally revealed the full picture of events. She confessed that Seth had pressured her, demanding that she bring a friend for sex games. Kat invited Lizzie, knowing about Seth's plans, but not warning her friend. According to Kat, on the night of the murder, Seth acted coldly and purposefully. She described how he strangled Lizzie despite her resistance and pleas. Kat claimed that she was paralyzed with fear and could not help Lizzie. After the murder, Seth forced Kat to help him get rid of the body. They took Lizzie to Pierce Island, where, on Seth's orders, Kat dragged the body into the water and disguised it with algae. On October 13, 2012, Seth Mazzalia was arrested on charges of second-degree murder. He was also charged with rape and criminal conspiracy. Kat McDonnell was arrested in November of the same year. She was charged with being an accessory to murder and obstructing justice. The arrests shocked the local community. Many could not believe that Seth and Kat, who seemed like an ordinary young couple, could commit such a heinous crime. The prosecution insisted that Seth's actions were intentional and cold-blooded. They argued that he had planned in advance to bring a third person for sex games and was prepared for violent actions. In May 2014, the trial of Seth Mazzalia began. The case attracted considerable public and media attention. The courtroom was crowded, and groups of people gathered outside the courthouse demanding justice for Lizzie. Prosecutors presented evidence including text messages between Seth and Kat, which indicated their intentions to find a third participant for their sex games. The results of forensic examinations and expert testimony were also presented. Seth's defense tried to present Lizzie's death as an unfortunate accident during consensual sex games. They claimed that there was no intent to kill the girl and that Seth only helped dispose of the body after the tragic incident. Lizzie's family was present at every court session, suffering from the painful details of their daughter's final hours. Their presence reminded everyone of the human tragedy behind this case. A key moment in the trial was the testimony of Kat McDonnell. The prosecution offered her a plea deal in exchange for her testimony against Seth. Instead of a possible 20 years in prison, she was offered only 3 years on the condition of full disclosure of the truth about the events of that night. Kat agreed to the deal and gave testimony that shocked everyone present. She talked about the pressure from Seth, about his persistent demands to find a third participant for their games, about the threats he made to her. According to Kat, on the night of the murder, Seth acted cold-bloodedly and purposefully. She described how he strangled Lizzie, despite her resistance and pleas. Kat claimed that she was paralyzed with fear and could not intervene, fearing that she would become the next victim. Kat's testimony became a turning point in the case, providing the court and the jury with a complete picture of the horrific events of that night. In June 2014, after a lengthy trial, the jury found 32-year-old Seth Mazzalia guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 20-year-old Kat McDonnell, in accordance with the plea agreement, received only 3 years in prison. She was charged with hindering the prosecution and being an accomplice after the fact of the murder. The verdict elicited a mixed reaction in society. Many felt that the punishment for Kat was too lenient, given her role in the crime and the subsequent concealment of the truth. Others argued that without her testimony, Seth might have received a less severe sentence. Lizzie's family expressed mixed feelings about the verdict. They were satisfied that Seth received the maximum punishment, but considered the short prison term for Kat to be unfair. In their opinion, she had betrayed their daughter and did nothing to prevent the tragedy. After the trial ended, the lives of everyone involved in the case changed forever. Seth Mazzaglia began serving his life sentence in a maximum security prison. According to reports, he was repeatedly attacked by other inmates. Kat McDonnell was released from prison in July 2016, having served her 3-year term. She faced difficulties finding work due to her criminal past and tried to avoid publicity. Lizzie's family continued to struggle with the pain of their loss. They established the Lizzie Marriott Foundation, which provides scholarships to students studying marine biology, the field to which Lizzie dedicated her short life. The University of New Hampshire installed a memorial bench in honor of Lizzie, and also established an annual lecture on marine biology in her name. Thank you for the reminder. The tragic death of Lizzie Marriott left a deep mark on the lives of many people. Her parents, Bob and Melissa Marriott, dedicated themselves to preserving their daughter's memory and helping others. The Lizzie Marriott Foundation, created by her family, not only provides scholarships to students of marine biology, but also supports programs aimed at preventing violence and raising awareness about youth safety. In Lizzie's hometown of Westboro, Massachusetts, a memorial was created, a bench by a lake in the forest. This place has become a symbol of peace and reflection for those who knew and loved Lizzie. The Lizzie Marriott case also drew attention to the problem of relationship violence and the importance of caution when meeting new people. Many schools and universities have strengthened their student safety and violence prevention programs. The story of Lizzie Marriott is not only a tale of a horrific crime, but also a deep exploration of human nature. It forces us to reflect on the dark sides of the human soul and the dangers that can lurk behind an ordinary facade. This tragedy demonstrates how trust and kindness can be used against a person. Lizzie, an open and friendly girl, fell victim to those she considered friends. Her story reminds us of the importance of caution and attentiveness to those around us. At the same time, the community's reaction to this tragedy showed the strength of human solidarity and compassion. Thousands of people united to support Lizzie's family and honor her memory. The Lizzie Marriott case remains a painful reminder of the fragility of life and how quickly it can change. It calls on us to cherish every moment and be attentive to those we love.